All right, I'm calling this workshop to order. Today is September 20th at 5:30, and we have two topics we're going to be covering today. The first one is an update from the Downs on their annual report, and the second one is an update on the revaluation process. So both really interesting topics. So we're going to start with the Downs update. And again, for the public, this is part of the CEA where every year, once a year, the Downs comes and the town partners together to provide an update. So I'm just going to pass it over to Tom to kind of get us kicked off.
Yeah, so what you'll see in the packet this evening is both a PowerPoint presentation from the town and a report to kind of serve the official purpose, and the same is true for the Downs. I think just for order, we're going to go first, and then we'll turn it over to the folks from the Downs. As Chairman Anderson mentioned, the CEA does have requirements for both the Downs and the town to do this on an annual basis for the first 5 years. This evening is the 4th annual report, but it's reporting on 5 years of performance. So there'll be one more. Just as a footnote, I'll also mention anyone that's read that provision of the CEA, it was contemplated that this report would happen in March or the spring of the year. And after the first year, we realized it would really be better to do it in September after we've committed taxes and full value is kind of realized. That first one was a little hard to talk about because their numbers weren't exactly what the town was reporting. So at any rate, ever since we've done it in the September timeframe after tax commitment. So I guess next slide, Liam. So for the town's purposes, we're required to report on assessed value, permits issued, zoning amendments, and town initiatives to help promote the non-residential development. We also have some information we'll share regarding property tax revenues and overall reimbursement to the developers subject to the CEA terms. Next. So just a big picture, original assessed value of the property was 7.2 million. That is, as original assessed value, we obviously carry that right along, but that's not counted in the value creation. Since inception, there's been 178,512,000,000 in value created over the 5 years. And you'll see the total of 185 million, including the original assessed value. Down below gives a quick overview in terms of real estate property taxes and therefore revenues that are generated based on that value creation. The original assessed value of 7.2 over time has produced 116,000 in property tax revenue, whereas the new value created, the 178.5 has produced about 2.85 million in property taxes, all told just under 3 million. Next. This just gives a quick overview year by year. Again, we're in year 5. This is value created in each of those years. So first year, was starting humble beginnings. There's a lot of infrastructure work and some initial development work as well that did produce value. And you'll see how things have increased over the years. In the last couple of years, we've been just above $50 million, or they have been over just 50 million or so in value creation each of those years. And obviously that grand total is the 178.5 created to date. I'm not even sure what valuable information this slide relates. Nick, can you help me out here?
It's more reiterating the information from the last slide, but the bottom line points to the fact that early on, we were only capturing 3% for the town, and now we're capturing 100%.
And
that
that
changed 2 years.
Right, that change happened early in year 4, if you will. So we've had 2 years enjoying that 100% capture. Next. This is reimbursements through the credit enhancement agreement. For kind of presentation purposes, we've rolled up the first 3 years, and that first number of just over $700,000 reimbursed in the first 3 years. And then we've broken out years 4 and 5 specifically. You'll see it went up to 760 and then 1.1, almost 1.15 for a total reimbursement of just over 2.6 million since inception. There's that footnote that says numbers assume all taxes are being paid. Keep in mind, in many cases, value is created, taxes are paid by an entity other than Downs or one of those subsidiaries. So they don't get reimbursed until taxes are actually paid to us. So in some cases, they control that because they own the property and are paying taxes themselves. In other cases, they're relying on another entity to have paid those taxes. Again, reimbursement doesn't occur until we actually get paid. And by and large, that's not been an issue. Going forward, as they create hundreds, if not 1,000 different lots and taxpayers, that might get more challenging. All sorts of things happen why taxes don't get paid. So that's going to be an administrative challenge for us just to continue to track that. At the end of the day, taxes will be paid. There's a very clear process for imposing liens and foreclosing on property for unpaid taxes. So that will correct itself over time, but could lead to a kind of a management administration challenge going forward. Not yet. So the split, this is the simple 60-40 split, if you will. Sorry, this slide's a bit jumbled, but for purposes, as I said on the previous slide, we've reimbursed just over 2.6 million. That's the 40% of total taxes paid. And then for the town's purposes, we've retained 3.9 million. So over the time here, a total of $6.5 million in taxes have been paid over the 5 years for this property. Next. With respect to residential development on the ground, what exists today, there are 75 single-family homes, 158 condos, 234 apartments, and 12 assisted living units, totaling 479 units that are kind of physically exist today, and we presume fully occupied. That may be not a safe assumption, but I think nearly fully occupied.
Yeah.
With respect to residential units under construction, there are 5 single-family homes, 8 condominiums, 45 apartments, and no assisted living. So 58 units are under construction right now. By my math, counting what exists and what will exist soon, that's about 537 units in total. And then last, with respect to the non-residential square footage, at this point, 100% complete is 564,000 square feet of non-residential taxable value, or excuse me, taxable property. And then there's another 345,000 under construction, actively under construction as we speak, totaling 910,000 when all of that non-residential work is complete. I believe the Downs will be speaking to how those numbers compare to the performance standards that exist within the CEA. So with that, I'm going to flip it over to Nick, the assessor, to provide some detail. This is a slide that I asked him to develop. I think the council will recall that we've seen some notable changes in the diversity of our tax base, and importantly, a notable shift in terms of the non-residential value. And that's a really important factor as we go forward. And this just helps better understand that and really isolate what contribution this project has made in that regard.
I will draw your attention, if you will, to under the actual columns, the total non-residential at the very bottom, the number 25.2%. So it's my understanding that at some point in time, it was either formal or informal, a goal of the town to reach that benchmark of 25% of all taxable value being from non-residential sources. This is the first year in which we've reached that goal and just surpassed it. So the exercise here that Tom was alluding to, if you take the columns in the middle that are pink there, that's what the shift is from the Downs property over the last 5 years and the new value created in each of those categories. So if you subtract those out from the actual totals, you see an as if scenario, if the Downs hadn't been developing this property over the years, what that shift from residential to non-residential would be. And instead of a 25.2% non-residential, it would actually be 23.9%. There's some assumptions in this what ifs, but this is, the closest representation. It feels fairly accurate that if you back out what they have created there would be less non-residential property for the tax burden distribution. And then the second point that you can deduce from this would be just the 2 middle columns themselves. Each year, it's increasingly becoming that the shift of just within the Downs, there's more non-residential than residential. So 60-40 now of the new value created in just that part of town.
Nick, can I ask the questions?
Yeah.
So in practical terms, like shifting the commercial or the non-residential, that percentage point, like what does that actually mean in terms of tax shift from personal property taxes that otherwise would have been paid had we not done it?
Sure. If it's okay to mention, you actually had asked me that prior, so I was able to look into it. And, you know, this may not speak volumes, me just saying it, but the actual percentage difference over the last 5 years, people's tax bills would have been 1.7% higher for a homeowner if this shift hadn't occurred. But because the Downs is existing and creating this new value, the tax bills are approximately that lower than they would have been, not quite 2% lower.
Mhm.
And I can speak to more of that after this slide if you wish. So the last point on this slide that's still up there, and it's not spelled out, but if you were to see the difference in where we are now for non-residential actual versus where we were 4 or 5 years ago, the total new non-residential in town is approximately $223 million of new non-residential or commercial value in town. And you see the number that is spelled out in the Downs column, 112 million of that was within the Downs. So approximately 50% of all non-residential new construction in town over the last 4 to 5 years has been within the Downs.
You're gonna-
Know what that means.
That's pretty remarkable.
I just had a follow, yeah, I was gonna join in the applause there because but I had a question first, but we talked about 80-20, this 80-20 split between commercial and residential components of our tax base. So we've moved from 20 to 25. That's great movement in a short period of time. But I thought the idea was to try to switch that at some point. It was going to flip. We're going to have a vast majority of our tax base that would come from commercial property.
I wasn't present for such discussions, but I think that'd be,
Not have been either.
I-
but it's easier number.
I think that'd be probably implausible. I think that number of 25 can continue to increase over time, but I think there will always be more residential just for the sheer volume of properties in town of residential homes.
I know we were thinking 70-30 is what would impact.
But I mean, the fact that it's moving is great and.
Yeah.
We'll
I would-
get back to-
I would say the majority of towns are going the other direction or staying stagnant, so.
And this excludes Costco and IDEX at this point, which are pretty big.
IDEX was partially complete on April 1st, but Costco, it was just the land on April 1st.
Okay.
So that is to come in the following year.
Councilor Hamel, to your point, I'll just, I'll mention J Main as an example, a very recent example. Majority of their value, 65%, if my memory serves me, was commercial, was the paper mill. And very dangerous when you have a single taxpayer. And in fact, that mill is closed and they're really challenged.
That's
Because
a fair point, but whenever we're compared to mill towns, I just, you kind of lose me on the comparison there. So I know that our bond guy likes doing that, but we're not really a mill town, so.
No, the only point is diversification is important.
Yeah.
And
Fair enough.
That's one of the key metrics that Joe shared that the bond rating agencies look at. So this just further, I think, improves our diversification as it
Yes.
relates to our bond rating, which is great.
yes.
And we're not in a different spot.
Mhm.
We have to have our assets diversified as well.
Mhm.
We're no different than the town. Right.
Yeah, thank you for this, Nick. I know that property values have been going up, skyrocketing really lately. How does that work with a new development? So if a new house comes online and it sells for $1 million, do you assess it at $1 million or do you notch it down to be comparable with the rest of town?
It's assessed with our current cost table, so it's assessed as if it was worth something in 2019, basically.
Okay.
So it's on par with everyone else's assessments.
So we expect these numbers to go up just about the same as the rest of town.
Yep.
And if I could just make a point or ask a question, seeing as we got our bond ratings, which I know we'll be talking about later. Am I correct that because we have such great diversity and we are doing these shifts so that we have, a greater portion non-residential, and I'm looking at Tom, that helps the bond ratings, doesn't it? As
Certainly
far
does.
as,
It's an indication to the bondholders that we will have a strong ability to pay back our obligations going forward. Absolutely.
and then better bond ratings mean lower carrying costs.
Lower interest rates and lower costs.
It's like your credit score.
Yep,
If you have a
absolutely.
lousy credit score, you're gonna have really high interest rates, so.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
You'll see some commonality between, when you look at other towns with their tax increases over over the recent, say, 3 years, and their bond rating from, say, a AA to a single A to a B and so on. There's a lot of commonality with those rate increases and their bond rating.
Oh, yeah.
Good, we're gonna shift to kind of a few planning slides, so Autumn is here to address those.
Sure, thank you. So we'll just go over the permits that we actually saw in fiscal year 2023. And there's some redundant numbers right now. It's 18 single-family units, building permits and growth permits. And I kept this on there because your next year's report is going to look a little bit different because of the rate of growth ordinance. There may be growth permits that are issued and they won't match the building permits because they can be issued with site plan. So we also saw 46 certificates of occupancy received this year. Again, some of those projects carry over fiscal year. So just tracking those that way. And we have 3 single-family homes under construction right now. We have 67 multifamily building permits issued. That's Hackamore 2 and Next Gen project. And then 125 COs issued. And so 3I Home and Town Center and Mixed Use Center, Lot 1, we have another 51 and then 138 multifamily projects. Those have received growth permits, but those were in fiscal year 2024, but they were approved in 23. The next slide. This one has to do with non-residential. So our non-residential issued about 152,000 square feet of for COs. And then we have Throttle Garage, Costco, and Next Gen. They're under construction. And then approved but not permitted yet, we have Allagash, we have the apartments, Lot 1, and the Downs Mixed Use Project, about 50,000 square feet. And the next slide. So these are the COs that we saw in 2023. Dillon Sheet Metal, DPR, part of IDEX, Front Runner, Park Condos, Hackamore Place Apartments, Carriage Walk Phase 2, and the Uplands Phase 2. And so you've probably seen these projects for a couple of years. Some of them have carried over several years. Under construction, Costco, Next Gen, Hackamore 2 Apartments, and the Throttle Garage expansion. And then again, the approved projects, 3I, the Town Center multifamily, mixed use building, Allagash, and then an office and retail space on Market Street.
I thought I saw in the press that you guys also have something with Enermed potentially coming to the site. That's not captured here. I guess it's too
Right.
early.
We have not seen any
Okay.
submittals, just talks with Dan.
Okay.
And then zoning amendments, this one may have been contemplated in FY23, but it's actually going to be taking place in 24. But these are the 2 zoning requests that are part of the school option. And so that's all I have.
So for the zoning requests, especially because the planning board did meet this week, I know there were questions about what is planned for the VR4 change. And I don't know if that's something you guys can talk about when you go through your presentation to let us know what you're contemplating to use that for if it is rezoned.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful because so far we've heard more about it from the town and planning board than we have from you guys. So that I think is an important pivot.
So just a few slides to close in terms of initiatives to promote non-residential. Again, this is a clear specific requirement in the CAA for the town to actively be engaged here. SEDCO really handles the first 2 bullets in terms of general support and referrals, image building, and kind of collaborating through marketing and such with the staff at Crossroads. For our part, staff is actively involved, meeting, I think in some cases weekly with Dan and his team. I know Angela and Autumn are very engaged, and we find it to be very beneficial to have that kind of direct line of communication and a standing meeting just to kind of identify issues, work through issues, and I think it's proved quite well. In the past, past councils have chosen to have a liaison to the Crossroads and the Downs project. And that's something we could certainly continue and consider in the future. And then certainly near and dear to all of you is the rate of growth ordinance. That was a big undertaking. It has been a bit of a preoccupation for years now, frankly. But there is a new rate of growth ordinance in place, and I think it provides all parties, including the Downs, some near-term clarity in that regard. Next. Just wanted to report, and I apologize for how jumbled the slide is, but at this point, and this is information directly from the school department, and we sourced it directly from them. At this point, of the 525 units or so that exist, there's 47 students enrolled in Scarborough schools. And just for comparison, the model that was done at the front end of this project at this point assumed that there'd be 86 students and about 566 units completed by year 5. So just for comparison, they're kind of pretty close on units, but trending, about half of the students that were expected.
Do we have any assumptions in terms of why that is?
I'm not going to speculate. What we're fairly confident is the number of bedrooms and units is a pretty clear determinant, and I suspect the bedroom mix may have changed somewhat from the original market study and forecast to what they actually built. But I'll
I
let them
think the
speak.
single families are about what was expected in terms of students per single family. And I think the apartments and condos, the model assumptions are higher than obviously reality. So that it's really the condos and apartments that are driving the number down versus the 5-year outlook.
Yeah, I was struck by the number that you showed earlier, the number actually that Tom showed is that how few single family units there were compared to, multifamily units.
75 total. Yep.
This, as a developer, this is why the CPD zone is important, because it allows density. And with density, you're not building 3 and 4 bedroom homes because it doesn't make mathematic sense. So it's a little counterintuitive, and you can see it in the numbers. It is definitely single family related. I think we have one under construction right now. If I'm not mistaken, that's it. Not that it won't be more, but it's not our best return either, put a simple way.
The one thing though that I think we still. wanna
Density
watch-
matters.
The one thing we want to watch as things progress, and this came from the enrollment study, was that 3-bedroom apartments now tend to be producing, at least based on the enrollment study, the same amount of students as a single family home. So I think that's something we need to, as a council, keep our eyes on as things grow. And I know part of the conversation we've had with Autumn is tracking that on a semi-annual, annual basis so that we can know, are we seeing what's projected with, 0.8 students per 3-bedroom, or is this trend continuing? Because this trend is good for the schools, but if we start seeing things pivot, I think that's going to be a watch out for the council to make sure the schools can absorb the student population.
The other thing I'd add is that there are the sheer economic condition, which is not in our control, anybody here, it really drives a lot of this, right? So people are changing the way that they reside. The Ryan Fecto, I forget the number, the LD, whatever it is, 2003 or something. Yeah, 2003. That's going to drive some change. So, to say that this is our trend and it's sticking here, we can't represent that. We simply don't have the data to support that. But the thought of inflation and its continuation, despite what they do with interest rates, is going to drive behavioral changes, which will probably tamper with these numbers. Just what it is.
Yep.
And not favorably.
So just a final slide for me. Our best guess at this point from a population creation or estimate of the units that are built and occupied, we estimate about 943 people live in the Downs. And again, for comparison, the model suggested just over 1,000 and a few more units as well. So population seems to be tracking fairly closely to the original estimate. And that concludes the towns portion. As I mentioned, there is a formal report that will be a part of the record, if you will. We've plucked, if you will, some of the key points that are in this report, particularly on the assessing side. So all the background and backup details here, should you wish to see it. Right. Go ahead.
Thanks. Dan Bacon here, on behalf of Crossroads with Peter. I'm going to kick it off and touch on our components. There's a lot of overlap with the town presentation, so I'll be quick. And just start with, you can keep going, Liam. this is really kind of the basics of what we want to report on. I'm going to talk about non-residential status. Ours is a little different because we actually account for projects under contract or in permitting, so our number's a little bit higher, but align with the town report where we are on infrastructure, because the CEA plays a major role, and that's the reason for the CEA, is to enable some of those extraordinary infrastructure costs, both on and off site. Talk about the next couple of years, and then Peter's going to wrap up with some kind of big picture conclusions. You can go to the next one, Liam. And keep on rolling. We submitted a report and it's in your packages. So this is really what the report covers. I'm not going to walk through each of these items. And Tom also outlined what we report on. But I'm going to focus on those three buckets. One thing I would note is, in addition to the metrics, there was public process expectations in the first 5 years, and we've met those, both with the downtown committee process, a few counselors here who are on that process, and the community center process early on. So we wanted to mention that those, in addition to non-residential performance, that those needed to be addressed, and we've done that. If you go to the next slide. And this is, again, a bit repetitive to Tom's overview. We have the same, essentially the same square footage for what's complete as of March of 23, March of this year. What's under construction. The additional item included here is what's in the pipeline. So what's under contract and being ready to start construction. So these are the square footage numbers that are really represent what Autumn covered in terms of things that have been permitted, which brings us to close to 1.4 million square feet of non-residential building area. And in the CEA, the upper requirement, there was 2 requirements by 2029, that 500,000 square feet of non-residential development occur. And then by 2034, 900,000 square feet. So we're meeting today, both under completed and under construction, kind of that 900 threshold. And obviously with what's under contract and in the pipeline, we're well past that with 1.4 million square feet. So we wanted to report on that. The pie chart shows kind of the makeup of that non-residential square footage. So if you go to the next one, Liam, we'll talk a bit about infrastructure. And so infrastructure isn't the overall site infrastructure. It's really the enabling infrastructure, the extraordinary costs involved in delivering a project like this and a site like this. And so there's a lot to it. And this just lists out the agencies, the partners that we have, and the review process that goes into that infrastructure and all the inputs that kind of drive what we put in the ground, DOT, DEP, through the town and other utilities. So if you go to the next slide, this is our overall site. And it gives you an update as to what's complete or under construction as of March of 23. So this shows that the enabling infrastructure we've been working on for the past handful of years is really nearing completion, and we're actually ready to jump into the next phase, the town center area of the project, which is in the outlook. In fact, we're so close to completion, we're actually be coming forward in the next month or so with some street acceptance, because these roadways are going to be ready to be turned over to the town.
We actually just posted our ILOC today. Just a little under $7 million.
For the next.
That we dropped off here. For the downtown start.
Start the first phase of town center.
So we're green light go.
This slide's super important because my understanding why the town went into a CEA, why we're here, is to put the risk of this enabling infrastructure on you guys. And in order to support that economic development, we agreed to have a credit enhancement agreement. So to date, it seems like we've given $1.5 million to the Downs as a result of that.
2.6.
2.6. So I'm just curious, how much, if you guys can share, how much have you guys spent building this infrastructure, just from a comparison point between the money you put in upfront and how we've contributed at least 2.6 million of that?
We have that in here. It's north of 60.
North of 60? 60.
I'm gonna chat about that.
Okay.
That's all near and dear to my heart.
If I could just go off for a slight second, just maybe a bit of history and recollection. The credit enhancement agreement was based and intended to help defray some of the infrastructure expense. And the Downs provided some estimates of overall costs and really said we want to focus on those extraordinary kind of the enabling infrastructure. And that estimate was about a $75 million investment at the time.
Mhm.
And if you do the math in the CEA, that it's not by chance that the full payout, if performance standards are met, puts the CEA reimbursement between $75 and $80 million. So
Well,
the intent was to cover that level of effort for infrastructure expense.
We're gonna be a
That was
lot
all-
further north than that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That was all pre-COVID. And as we all know,
Yes,
the cost of infrastructure, particularly for the school and other things, has just skyrocketed. So if
I
this
just
happened
want-
now,
yeah.
it probably would be a lot higher than that.
I just wanted to kind of ground the thinking at the time and the fundamentals that were in the CEA and the reimbursement amounts were based on those estimates, which have changed. But it was really intended to help defray some of those costs of the major enabling.
It's an interesting dynamic if you think about it, just to add a little humor here, but you know, we talk about the impact the Downs has on keeping tax increases down for the residents. It's certainly a yes on that. There is not a debate numerically, at least. There can be politically, of course, which we do all too well, but I think it's interesting. If you look at it economically from our point of view, you know, if taxes are going up 20-30%, you know, compounding to keep pace with how inflation's gone, which is compounding over the last few years is probably somewhere in the 12-15% range. The fact that town's been able to keep their taxes down is great for us when we're paying tax bills, but it's not great for reimbursement for the CEA because it's not keeping pace with inflation, right? So we have to, we basically pull that in and eat that gap. And we'd rather that because we're playing long ball here. If we were playing short ball, we would be wishing you guys would go up double digits on your taxes because it'd be great for us. So don't lose sight of that. We know the ins and outs, politics aside.
I mean, I know all good points. I think the other part of it, though, I think John mentioned the fact that if we hadn't done this deal with the Downs, that, our tax rates would have gone much higher. But there's also, an aspect of this with inflation and what's happened with building costs and that sort of thing. It's going to be easier for you to hit your target sooner. Okay, right. And to get big bonus payout levels in terms of the CEA. So I think when we're talking about that, we got to talk about both sides of the ledger.
Yeah, I think what matters to me there is that we can point to the economic sustainability of this project and what it means to the residents. How it impacts us is our trouble on our balance sheet. Again, we live here, and we don't want to see the taxes go as high as Westbrook or Gorham or pick one. I think the only comparable town might be Saco or Biddeford in terms of increases, and I'm not even sure if I'm right about that. I believe it's Saco. I think Biddeford went high, but so we get it. Inflation is not keeping pace with the delta between the tax increases and inflation. Hurts the CEA funding, yet long-term, it's better for the residents. And we'll accept that. We're proud of that. That's something we're pleased with.
So the next slide is another key component in terms of infrastructure investment, but offsite. So as the council knows, we have a 5-year major transportation improvement project. This is just updating you in terms of what's complete as of this year, what's underway, and then we have 3 more years to execute on. So Route 1 kind of from Town Hall North is largely complete, as is the Payne Road area and the exit 42 intersection. Those were intentionally done early based on the project and based on the needs of the transportation system, the road system. And we're now getting into, and we're underway with the second year, which is focusing on Route 1, especially front door of Scarborough Downs and the signals south of Town Hall. So that's where we are. And we have 3 more years after this year.
So the one thing for that, the adaptive traffic signals that have been put in, those are amazing coming down Route 1. And, you know, I left my home today 5 minutes before I usually, I left the time I usually leave, and it took me 3 minutes to get here, which usually at this time of day could take a lot longer. So Route 1 is working. I will say when I'm sitting at leaving town hall, I tend to sit at that light for a long time. Like Council Hamel and I were at a meeting last week where I think both of us started texting each other and it's like, when is the light gonna change? So definitely
were
working
moving
when
to
it's
top of
fast,
house.
but yeah. Yeah,
It certainly prioritizes.
yeah, it does. But we're sitting there for a while.
Well, it'll be a much more, I'm no traffic expert, but
They'll learn.
that and completing the entire corridor is key because
Mhm.
Highgate to Town Hall isn't yet on that system.
Yeah.
So once you have a functioning complete corridor, you're going to see even kind of greater improvements.
So one thing I'll talk to this a little bit, the TMPs, I had a perception, and I was obviously not very well informed, but I thought that these things were gonna be primarily, you know, Downs expenses. I didn't expect that we would be paying as much as we have, you know, in some cases a third or whatever, state pays the third, Downs pays the third. And also I won't get into the, you know, the school land thing, but even there, you know, we're paying for a third of infrastructure. So can you speak to that? You know, you were not shy about asking us to, you know, help you with those. So do you have a view on that? Are you carrying your fair share, or is there more we should be doing, or?
Yeah, sure. I can speak to it. First of all, you're not paying for it. Those are impact fees. All those fees that have been paid in over the years for traffic is the pool of money that you're pulling from. So it's not impactful to the taxpayer.
For the TMP
So
related.
it's just, to kind of unlock all that stuff that turns into a political hot button, and it shouldn't. The facts are, the developers pay for that. And not just us, any developer. So it's not about us, it's about all these developers show up, part of their permits and various things. They gotta write a bunch of checks and of course, they pass all that on to the consumer. So at the end of the day, the consumer pays for it. And the fact that the town didn't perform on these traffic improvements is why this is a big hot button, because everybody has gotten frustrated. But the money's been sitting there, and it's not the town's money, it's developers' money that were paid into the town, which then it becomes the town property. That's how that works.
Mhm.
The one
And I'll
other thing-
debate, I'll have happy to debate that.
Those are, you know, and I'm eager to try to get into looking at more detail on CMP. You know, we've taken a cut at that, and it also has its evil twin, or it's, you know, it's twin angel, cost to serve. And, you know, unlike you, our line of sight to our numbers and our ability to really kind of track those is not as pencil sharp as yours is. I think that's a safe statement. So we really need to improve that and make sure that we are, you know, not only collecting the right amount of monies, but also, you know, allocating them accordingly. One thought I'd like to leave everybody with is that you know, my first job out of college was I had a job called Manpower and Recruiting Coordinator, and it was at a chemical plant, an Exxon chemical plant in New Jersey. And my job was to allocate people according to 4 product lines. So I think we need to look at that. If we were to do a simple, you know, calculation of how much time and effort of staff we have spent on doing things related to the Downs, I think it would be an interesting analysis. So I would like us to look at that at some point over the coming year, and, you know, for us to just compare notes on that, because I think ultimately staff levels ought to reflect, you know, the load factor we're carrying. And another simple measure would be just counting the number of agenda items that are related to the Downs, not only for the planning board, but also for the town. I think it's safe to say in the past year, we've spent 50 to 75%. If you just count the number of agenda items devoted to development and most of them to the Downs. So I think it would be worthwhile that we try to spend some time on that and to make sure that we have the right staff levels, but that we're also trying to allocate them appropriately in terms of how much work. And that would extend to the assessor and a lot of other folks. There's a knock-on effect there.
I would hope that my comment to that would be that I would hope that the amount of time that the town is spending is under the amount that we're paying in. So I would
I think.
kindly respond to that way. The amount of fees, we don't have all our fees mathematically put into these things, nor do we have business tax, personal property tax, economic benefit to the overall area. Last time we looked at that, it was $88 million in 1 year outside of the downs.
But you do have things called in lieu fees that are kind of hidden, that do have a way of sort of, bouncing back our way or bouncing in the direction of people that,
You mean end users when they pay that?
the people buy property from you, there's an in lieu fee that I guess helps to offset your loss of CEA
Yeah.
percentages.
I would just say based on our comp.
I don't know if
plan-
we've done any of those, Don, but
I would just say based on our comp plan, our comp plan kind of indicated that this would be a high growth, high investment area for the town. So to me, it's logical, given the comp plan, that staff in town would be spending a disproportionate amount of time on this area, given the direction and the plan that the community decided as part of our planning. So I'm not surprised if Autumn and team are spending more time with you guys than one single person or individual, because that's reflective of the strategy that we outlined as a town.
oh, the town's making an investment. We've made an investment. It's a genius idea. And the thing is our investment on our return on a CEA has a sunset. Yours doesn't.
Are you saying you want to increase that?
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Autumn wrote down.
I wrote it down.
Let's do the math.
Next budget.
We're doing it now without the math, so.
On it.
Yeah.
You've heard of the term sunken cost, right?
Yeah. I've also heard of the term sinking ships. The next slide is 2-year outlooks, and maybe staff's involved in that. So the other piece here is, what's coming up, and Autumn outlined stuff that's been through permitting. The really exciting piece is this quarter, we're starting the town center, as Peter indicated. So we've post our performance guarantee. We'll have a pre-construction meeting. So the first phase of town center infrastructure will get started later this year in the first few buildings. Also, which is super exciting, is kind of the gateway in from Higas Parkway. Allagash is going to be starting. They received approval, I think, a month or so ago. So they're readying their plans for construction. A site just across the street, which is going to have amenities, a restaurant, retail, some office space. So we're really kind of getting into the exciting stuff in terms of town-wide amenities and destinations. And that's really what we're focused on for the next couple of years. And as Peter will touch on, this are the highest value buildings and the highest value sites. So we're really kind of ramping up in terms of in benchmarks on tax revenue, and expect about at least 130 million over the next 2 years to build on what's been performed to date, which is clearly notable. So at this point, I was going to have Peter.
Can I ask a question before?
sure.
So, I know the live, work, play aspect of what you guys have done, a lot of live and work has happened. This is like the beginning of the play. For clarity, when was the play supposed to come? Because I think a lot of people in town felt like the play piece was supposed to come earlier. And I don't know if that was ever part of the.
So in our CEA process, it was forecasted to be years 7 and 8. So I indicated up here, we're starting 2 years early.
Okay.
Obviously, it takes a year to perform construction. So, if it was year 8, we're going to be delivering play at year 6. So we're ahead of schedule. Obviously, there's been a lot of things that happened the last 5 years, the
Yeah.
pandemic, among other things. But we're ahead of schedule, and we're really excited about it, because this is the part that everybody's been waiting for.
Yeah. When will play be complete? Like, what's realistic? Assuming, like, knowing we can't predict the future and economic uncertainties, like.
I think your town green is the genesis of that.
Yeah.
What we done?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're thinking 25, end of 24, 25, the central square is gonna, it's probably gonna be phased, because we're gonna need to do it in phases, but that's the intention is related to play, in addition to these cool
destinations would be a central square, which is what's that, a year and a half from now.
Mhm.
And we think town center might be, you know, a 4 or 5 year build out, something like that. But it's a larger area, so.
Counselor Shoup has a question.
I have two questions. First, I heard you say townwide amenities. I'd like you to elaborate if you can a little bit on that. And then second, you said that we were going to get started on, you know, the downtown. And I've watched on the planning board liaison, I try to watch. And I know parking has been a contention a lot with some of the planning board members in regards to development. And so I know that at one point there was certain planning board members who were talking about a parking garage. And I think when I'm watching it and I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, you know, we're a town of 23,000 people. And I'm curious, you know, when you say we're going to get into the townwide amenities, I'm curious kind of what those are. And then I'm curious about their plan for parking for a town this size, because I am in my mind seeing a discrepancy between, you know, a town this size and the parking and planning that I've seen so far for downtown.
So in terms of amenities, the Central Square is really the hub that we're planning on. So that intends to have a green space with restaurants around it, a plaza area. We actually worked with John through the downtown committee process on seating ideas for that. And so we're using that guidance to really inform how we design kind of the central component of this town center. So that's a place that people can go on weekends and evenings, get dinner and hang out in the Central Square, go to a brewery. We're thinking about other kind of events that happen there that you would typically have in a central gathering place. So that's the focus in terms of this town-wide amenity. In addition to restaurants, breweries, other destinations that are kind of that kind. In addition, we've started our trail system through the project and we're going to continue to expand that. That really kind of ramps up with near Allagash and with the town center. And so those are some of the key kind of townwide amenities that we're talking about. In terms of parking, our intention is to plan for the potential for a parking garage. We're a long ways off from having a parking problem. And you really need to kind of, if it's in demand at some point, plan for it, have it in the right location so we can potentially go vertical from a surface parking lot. That's very common. Like you go to downtowns, villages, often there's like the public parking lot, right? That's in addition to on-street parking, that's your overflow parking. So we've been thinking about establishing kind of that overflow parking area that's not on any individual site and selecting a location where once there's demand or if there's demand, that could become a parking garage, which is also customary in downtowns that grow to a certain size. We just don't know yet whether it's going to grow to a size that warrants a parking garage. And it's a very expensive endeavor to jump to a parking garage before there's demand for it.
And you don't want the parking garage empty. Because as retailers look at small retail platforms come in and they look and they walk around, the worst thing you can have is an empty parking garage. So we actually want the parking to be as used as possible before we lift and go up. And the other thing we're doing, I don't think Dan hit was, and I apologize if you did. I think we're doing is we're matching services. So like medical is not there in the evening. So the adjacency with the parking and the continuity with the actual service that's going to be provided might offset like, dinner time when there's a few restaurants as an example.
Shared parking.
So shared parking kind of concepts we're trying to do, but we want to, and again, I know it's a little counterintuitive, but we want it to be full and active before we go up. And we're maintaining our air rights to do so.
Mhm. The one thing too, like parking is important, but I remember we had that GP cog study come that talked about how this could activate public transportation as well. So it's also figuring out if that's the case, how are you guys going to be enabling public transportation? And then I would also argue to try and get more cars off the road, loving to see more infrastructure around Oak Hill, sidewalks, safe walking to go more as well along with our comp plan to make sure that I see Angela in the back for the transportation committee. I used to be on there and I know they always talked about, getting cars off the streets is just as important as widening roads. And so I think that's something that hopefully the town can also kind of work through that at least addresses some of the parking for you coming from your neighborhood, you're gonna need a place to park.
Well, and we're building in a compact way, at a
Mhm.
density that it makes transit really practical.
Mhm.
Because you can get dropped off in the center of town center and be able to walk to a number of destinations versus most of Scarborough, where it's really not pedestrian friendly
Mhm.
to use transit.
There you go.
Karen, you good?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a good
welcome.
idea.
Let's see. Okay, so just a couple quick slides. So the first thing I want to comment is down on the bottom of the slide, the data source. The data, all this data here is from the assessor's office, with the exception of our forecasting. I just want to make that footnote. So on the left-hand side, the new assessed value. And again, no one's really hit on it. We did a little bit, but keep in mind that the dollars here, so when you do your HR allocation, our dollars are sheltered. So, you know, it's $1.35 to on a bad day to $1.40 benefit. So a dollar, this whole platform is, I think I've said it and I'll continue to say it, it's genius. The previous council people, the town manager that's been here, the staff that's been here, the CPD zone, setting that up and creating that density, and then creating a TIF district to shelter your incremental, that's what it's about, incremental taxes, is genius financially. It is one of the smartest things you could do as a town. I bet other towns are envious. And my point in that is that when you look at our dollars and our incrementality that we provide for the town and the taxpayer benefit, the math that Nick was mentioning, I heard 2 point something% we're contributing to impacting a decrease. Did I have that right?
1 point.
1.7
point.
something, yeah.
Okay, call it 1%, call it on the low side. That doesn't factor in the fact that these dollars are sheltered. This community does not understand that. It's a point of frustration for us. We worked really hard to get this TIF district set up with the town. And I just wish that this is our only time. We never can talk like this. It's always this format that takes us nowhere and frustrates everybody. This sheltering has got to get exposed to the public.
Mhm.
They have to realize what that really means to them. It's very, very important. And I'd say that if that was bad for us, I happen to know it's very good for the residents of this town.
I think the finance committee, if the public's interested in watching, talked about it to a degree at the last one. So it is being discussed for certain. So I would recommend anybody who wants to learn more about TIFs and how that works to watch the last finance committee that happened. Is that a fair statement? I watched parts of it, not all of it.
Yeah, towards the end, we covered it.
I mean,
It's been covered in the past,
Yeah.
it's on the town's website as well.
it's just, but we don't bring it to a point, and I know, Johnny, you're capable, Lucia, I know you're capable of rolling this thing up. What's it mean to the resident? Like my personal property, what's it mean to me? When I go home, I look at all this stuff, what the heck's it mean to me? How's it gonna impact my household? That's not coming through here.
And I would agree with that, with a lot of things. I mean, we do an excellent job communicating compared to a lot of municipalities. But, you know, the fact that it's like, even I'm sitting here going, I'm not gonna watch a finance committee. meeting."
It's
I don't
riveting.
even
Have you
think
seen
so.
John?
No.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's,
hobbies.
Yeah.
so,
Oh, well, you have them. I would leverage them.
but if something comes out that can be, you know, real quick communication, boom, boom,
Yeah.
to get across, I think needs to happen.
Well,
So,
I think that's why I asked Nick the question
Right.
about, like, help me understand practically what this means. And again, when you think about, and it's inclusive of the TIF benefit, right? Because that revenue we bring in the TIF fund includes the benefit to some extent, right? Is that correct? Now
No.
so when we have the TIF revenue fund, not immediately, but I know there's a lag in when that benefit gets calculated, and it's not particularly the fund, but it's the avoidance of county taxes and things that all factor in. This is why it's complicated, because it's complicated. But at the end of the day, it does help keep the tax rate lower. And the new revenue that you guys create is what I think Nick quoted of, if we didn't have that, the projects that that money went to were still needed. It wasn't projects that we would have not been able to fund. It was the public safety building, SEDCO, other things that were required that would have just gone to the existing taxpayers. And so there is a huge benefit of having the new value come in to be able to pay for these needs that would exist whether you guys were here or not.
It's,
So-
go ahead, sorry.
So, thank you. I agree with everything that John said. The issue is, I think, part of the other issue here, well, why it's hard to explain, is because it's not like money in the bank. It's not like a deposit in a bank account. You have to spend it on a qualified use, okay? So, and if you don't get to keep it, okay? It goes away. So it's not like cash exactly. I wish it were simpler, but that's, it's a way of sheltering taxes. It's a way of not spending as much, tax as we would otherwise, but you've got to spend it on things. And so far, we've actually, I think, spent, we were in the black for the first time over $1 million, and we spent $800,000 or $900,000 buying a new computer program upgrade for public safety. So that would have come out of our pocket otherwise. So it's probably a good use, but if you're telling somebody, there's more of this to come, it's like, well, okay, but I have to spend money in order to use it. So.
Yeah.
Can we use the term invest as opposed to spend more?
Yeah.
Because investment-
Yeah.
Oh, but to Dawn's point, though, I just want to say something. This is sheltered money should be treated like long-term capital
Yes,
in a business.
yes.
And so you should have a 3-year capital plan that you're using the sheltered money, because the only thing you can impact as a body and council is whether you have 100% capture or not. So the years where you don't, where you're not going to use it all, to your point, Don, you want to back off that, right? In the years where you're going to have it used, you want to call it in at 100%. I don't know about when you lose it, so maybe my 3-year window might need to be 5 or something, but the theory, if it was flushed out, would yield a much better use of those sheltered dollars for this community. I do know that. It's long-term capital. Sheltered dollars and long-term capital are synonymous.
I would just add on that point, and I don't want to belabor it, but the TIF revenue is something is real money. We can calculate it to the dollar. I think the mystery comes from the shelter benefit, which comes in with a lag in sometimes mysterious ways in terms of additional funding to support education, less county tax, and more revenue sharing. So there's not as direct a line to identify that shelter benefit, but the TIF revenues are very, very specific.
I think even Dawn and I would agree, which is like, out there, that it's a good problem.
Could happen.
Which is a good problem. It's a good problem to have. You've set up a business platform that is really smart long-term, and take advantage of it. It's a good problem to have.
And I will just add to really belabor this, but we as a council did take action to really extend and expand upon our application as terms of what we were allowed to spend these monies on. And so this is being done thoughtfully, like with a lot of, pre-planning, because we know there may come a point where we have to look at the revenues coming in and say, do we need to adjust our capture rate because we can't spend it? But I have a lot of confidence in the fact that we have expanded that application now to include lots of possible uses that were not contemplated when it was originally written.
And those capital uses would be otherwise part of the math that Nick does to put into the percentage of increase that nobody's making that connection. Not even, honestly, I don't even think the taxpayer group is, who's the best studied on this. I really don't think that, because in a way, they should be supportive of sheltered dollars because we can prove that it's lowering the tax rates. So I don't think their issue necessarily is how much money we might make for the town or bring to the town or the shelter program. I think the issue is more related to how it's spent. That's a little fogged up right now with all the politics around here, but that'll work its way out. The math's the math. The math's the math. Always is, always will be. It's the only undisputable thing we can have. So here, I just want to point out that in this box on the left, we've generated $178 million of incremental value, sheltered incremental value. Do you want to talk about that, Sewell? But the point I want to make about the box on the left, and what's unique about this setup, this public-private partnership. We've invested $66 million to date. That is, we'll talk about. We're quite north of that, but this is what is relevant to this conversation. And we've generated $178 million for the town of taxable value. At what risk to the town is the question I pose versus the Higas Parkway bond scenario. So again, not only do we have a genius financial platform because of all the tax efficiencies the town gets and the developer gets with its 40%, admittedly, for those that are here that hate us for that, we're putting it to work. It's not lining up pockets. We're putting it in the ground. And we've taken 2.6 million of that. The town's given us, we've put in 66. The town's given us 2.6. I don't know if that's a bad deal for the town. I can't imagine everybody should be clapping like a seal at the moment. That's the math. That's the math. These are facts, politics aside. And I'll go to the mat on this. So it's 4%. So said another way, under this CEA to date, we invest long-term capital of 96 cents on the dollar at the moment. You guys support 4 with no risk. That money would not be generated unless we come up with the funds private to put in the ground. Huge difference versus going to the town and say, oh, can you float a bond for us? Can you take the risk, taxpayer? Can you do this? Can you do that? It's none of that. This only performs if we perform. Please remember that. Don't lose sight of that in all this noise in this town. Okay, Dan covered the middle one. We're in year 11 of our requirements for non-residential square footage. Last one on the right is a non-residential tax base. This is the term we were using, Don, when we had talked about this. This was a big issue for the town, was shift the mix. And that's what this is doing. We're shifting the mix. So we've added 1.3% to the overall mix, but it doesn't sound like much, but with a tax base of, what are we, 5 billion, Nick, something like that? Well, that's $112 million in value on a non-residential platform. Now, Don's point, and I agree, is where's this town make its money? It's you know, some know, some don't. That's not our fish to fry. We're happy to help if we can. But you know, if we can help model that out or something, we'd be delighted. It's to our advantage, I think.
Peter, I don't mean to cut you short, but we
Yep.
do have another workshop agenda item. So if you want to,
I'll wrap up.
if you can wrap up in 5 minutes, and if you can.
I can wrap
close
up
with
in 2.
talking a little bit about the VR4 zone and what you guys are envisioning.
This slide here, I think, let's focus on the right-hand side. These are our forecasts. This is very important. So here we are, we're year 5, 178 million. Our target in year 7 is 260, call it 250 or 259, call it 260. The way we're set up right now with the various projects we have on the table in our capital plans over the next 3 to 5 years, 2 to 4 years, excuse me, 2 to 4 years, we're estimating that in year 7, fiscal year 25, 26, we will have created taxable value of $310 million. And that $310 million at the same mill rate would generate less our CEA contribution that we get back from you folks. It would be somewhere in the 5 million range net to the town annually in perpetuity. Our deal has a sunset. Your deal does not. The final piece I want to remind everybody of, when you do the math on all this stuff, our families in town here have made a commitment to this community. And it's not been easy. We've been personally attacked. We've never responded, nor will we. We typically have most of the council people in management seeing things similar. We know it's not easy, but keep in mind that this relationship and this partnership, as we call it, which I I've never had partners like this in my life, by the way. So I do want to point that out, but our families, at the close of fiscal year 26 and 7 will have invested over $200 million in this town. And I just want to keep everybody and keep a perspective for everybody. We're very proud of that. And that doesn't come easy. That's a huge investment. And we appreciate those that work with us, and we even appreciate those that don't, because they make us get out of bed a little bit earlier so we can outthink them. It's very important. We run the lights later at night, we get out of bed a little earlier. So we don't mind the controversy. I don't care for, as an investor, I don't care for the amount of politics that go behind this. I think it should be quelled. This is a business transaction. This is the wishes of the comp plan of this town of Scarborough. And we're proud of what we've done, but we're going to be in this thing for a couple $100 million here in the coming few years. Thank you. Q&A.
So I think, the only question is the school at this point, like
Okay.
on the VR4 zone.
Yeah, I have a quick slide and I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it. I think Liam has it.
Nor have we, by the way, so.
Yeah,
Okay. So just to be clear about what's proposed to occur in this is the eastern part of the zone change. So there's 2 map amendments. And the graphic up on the right is just to show the area of the school site is actually in the proposed change from VR4 to CPD. So that wasn't entirely clear to the planning board on Monday. So we just wanted to clarify that it's a integral component of making the school project move forward. And I think maybe most of the council knows that, but the public may not. So that's about, I think, 30 to 40% of the area for the CPD amendment from VR4. The remaining part of the area, there aren't specific plans in terms of a layout and a master plan. That's something that we would do next with the planning board. But the intention from a use standpoint is this is an area that is really between the Innovation District and the neighboring, it's Mark O'Leary's project that's underway, hasn't started yet right there. So our intention is to really kind of transition from commercial into residential. So there would be residential closer to the school site to be compatible with the school. There would be residential closer to the cottages off Sawyer Road, which is the O'Leary project, and a more commercial focus, I'll say, on the more northerly part of the rezone area, which would border the Innovation District. So we want to be really thoughtful about blend and compatibility with what's happening around the site. And so that's really what's intended. We aren't down to, is it single family homes or two family, et cetera. But really kind of a blend. It needs to be noted that industrial uses would not be allowed in this area. The zone is very specific that industrial uses are only allowed in the Innovation District. There's a specific area in the CPD that allows for those more industrial type uses.
So are you saying that we would need to expand the Innovation District platform, if you will, over here into the CPD to do similar work there?
To do the more industrial uses that you see in the Innovation District. Innovation has some businesses that could go here that are just more commercial type. But like mainly Tubbs or Crown Lift, some of the kind of notable Innovation District uses wouldn't occur in this area with the zone change.
My point I'd like to make on these amendments to try to help us is, obviously, we talked about the density, the importance of the density just a little bit ago. That aside, the kind of the interaction with how this is going down with the planning board, I watched the other night, and to me, the planning board is going to approve this plan, this master plan. So your ultimate understanding of what's going to happen here will occur when we get to a point where we're going to develop that phase. We'll go for master plan approval of the various things that Dan and his team do with Autumn and the rest of the staff here. So there are enough entitlements or agencies and checkpoints along the way if we put something together right now for this, you know, bubble diagram stuff like you might see here, its accuracy might be right on, or it might be 80%. We don't know. But this town has enough, what's the word I'm looking for? Governance, I guess. I don't know.
Oversight.
Oversight, there you go. To deal with this. It's what it is. I don't know if this is helpful, but.
Yeah, this is
we'll try.
The other thing to note is some of the things the planning board brought up, open space requirements, they're actually the same between the VR4 and the CPD. In the proposed setback, the rear setbacks as part of the discussion from residential to residential is the same between the VR4 and what we're proposing, or what's being proposed by the town rather, to change. So from some of those elements that were brought up, they're very comparable zones in that regard. Differences are density and the fact that commercial can occur in the CPD. But there's a very different setback for commercial to a residential zone in the CPD that would still be in place. That's not what's proposed to be changed. So there's good checks and balances.
I guess one of my main questions there is at build out, like in the comp plan, we've been talking about 2,000 units over 20 years for this development.
Mm.
Are you targeting that, or are you looking to kind of to increase that with this expansion of the CPD?
That's our target.
We don't think it changes, John, because the school site really takes up a very similar area geographically. So much of what is going to happen, you know, if this with the zone change was really planned, you know, more in the vicinity of the school site. Obviously, there's not going to be commercial and residential in the school site. So that's why we think it's doesn't have a net impact overall, well, not substantial.
We're kind of losing our way on the business transaction as well. The deal here is we're trying to replace land that will not be taxed, property that we own today that we're going to sell to the school or to the town that will be non-taxable. What's the word? Tax exempt. Thank you. That's what's really going on here. Not much more complicated than that.
Well, thank you guys
Very simple.
for coming. I want to make sure we give Nick enough time, which I've been getting so many calls and emails about the revaluation. So I want to make sure we give you some time to talk a little bit and walk everybody through the process. So
Thank you, folks.
Thank you guys for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Along the lines of time, I had prepared 30 minutes or more, depending on questions, and it appears we have less than that until 7, and that's including you might want to take a break before 7. How would you advise we proceed?
I think it's worth going through it because it's relevant and. Is it
just
okay?
go as far as I can go?
Yeah, I would
I
go
won't
as
get
far as
through
you
it all, I
can.
believe.
I would go as, that's my reaction. I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, do we have to start the regular meeting at 7?
I think we can go a little bit over.
Okay,
That's my
I mean,
gut.
this is relevant.
I know we do have the U11 baseball boys team coming that I want to make sure yeah, it'll be a good civics lesson for them. So
They'll be very interested in reading that.
yeah. So why don't we plan for 25 minutes, Nick, and just
Okay.
kind of go from
I'll
there.
try to be a little quicker, and if it seems I'm glossing over, I'll chalk it up to that. So I'm Nick Cloutier, the town assessor. If anyone's watching that doesn't know me, I'm here to present on the 2024 revaluation. We've in the assessing office and the townwide, we've done our very best to make sure people know this is happening. We put a lot of work and time into putting newsletter articles out, putting things in the leader, including insert in every bill. So now I'm pretty certain that word's gotten out. I've heard it talked about. So now the next step is where we are, is what does that even mean? And today's the first step in clarifying and helping people get to that point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the basics of a revaluation, but more so spend time on why is there a need for it and why specifically now in Scarborough. And then I'll end with a little bit about why it's going to be different than the last one in 2019 and what people can expect in the next few months. The purpose of this presentation is a kickoff, if you will. Like I said, we've been thinking about this for some time. Honestly, since the last one, it's been in the discourse with council and leadership and hopefully with the public as well, and I'll get to that. But today is to educate and clarify some of the context of what a revaluation will mean for people. And I'd like to point out, if you only get one thing, and hopefully you'll get a few more than that, I would drive you to the town website, the assessing section. There's a revaluation dedicated section. And as of Monday, we actually revamped it to kind of coincide with this event to make it more user-friendly. And there's a whole bunch of content on there because we want people to be well-informed. And we've got 30 frequently asked questions already answered and more to come, and a whole bunch of educational materials as well. So some revaluation basics. There will be more detail on the website, but since I'm trying to go a little faster, we as an assessing staff for Scarborough, we determine the assessed values of property, and the way to do that is to try to get it to align with market value, what a property could sell for. That was last done in 2019. The market has changed pretty dramatically since then, especially for residential homes, but all types of property. So the balance between assessed value and sale price is no longer in alignment. And when that happens, it's proposed that perhaps that balance of you're paying your fair share of taxes, which is what the assessed value helps do, divide the tax burden. Maybe there's an imbalance if it's not all at market value. So when you bring the properties back up to market value, it presumes that the burden will be equally dispersed, fair and equitably. And it's very important to note that a revaluation is revenue neutral. So that means that although the valuation of town will definitely increase as a result of this shift back up to market value, no new tax dollars are in fact generated. So if the budget were to stay the same, if your property went up the same as everyone else's, your tax bill would be the same.
Can you say that one more time? Because I think that's.
Sure, and I'll say it some more in here as well. But if all the properties went up by the same exact amount and the budget stayed the same, your bill would be the same. So that means the revaluation itself does not create new tax dollars or increase your bill. It's just a redistribution of that amongst all taxpayers.
Thank you.
And though value goes up, we would expect the tax rate to go down and therefore it be revenue neutral.
Yep.
The teacher in me is like trying to visualize how I would get that concept across to students in an easy way.
He has a good visual that at least works.
Well, I was gonna say, and I can't believe that someone hasn't done a cartoon or something
Yeah.
about this
Yeah.
somewhere.
Fascinating, really. Good stuff, man.
I think Tom might be in a video for a cartoon.
There we go.
If you lose a bet or something, right? So why are we doing it now? Why Scarborough? So we've been talking about this since the last one, and that was in 2019. And I wasn't yet the assessor yet, but I was a resident. I came to the meetings and they said, we learned from this one. We want to do it more often and we want to do it differently. So that's been the plan since the last one. And when I became the assessor in December of 19, just a year later, we had a workshop with the then council to kind of outline how we wanted to proceed. So we've been laying that groundwork, including my annual commitment presentations last year and the year prior. I've talked about it and what's to come. And it's also been in the budget book exhibits for the past 2 years. 2 years ago, I suggested waiting a year because we weren't sure how the market was going to adapt to the current circumstances and to allow my team to prepare for doing the best job possible. Another reason why now, the assessed to sales ratio. So your assessed value is this, but you could sell it for a lot more. That ratio has become more out of whack and the assessed values are not as representative of the actual market value now. So that determines a ratio based on state audits of how we're doing in the assessing department to get that balance correct. And when that ratio goes too low, the state imposes that we must reduce people's exemptions. If you looked at your bill this year, everyone's homestead exemption was actually reduced by a state making us do that. And then also they withhold reimbursements. They reduce how much funding they give us back for properties that are exempt or certain programs. They give us less than they would have otherwise if that ratio is out of balance. And there's actually state requirements for thresholds that we must be above or below respectively. And I'll get to that on the next slide. So why do we need valuations to be equalized? And equalized is another way to say revaluations and brought up to current market value. First of all, it's the law. There are things in the Constitution that say we must do this, and the law and the courts have backed that up to say it means market value. So assessed value should represent market value. And then furthermore, state law has also made provisions that in order to ensure assessments are fairly and equitably distributed and done properly amongst all towns in Maine, they want it to be no lower than 70% or no higher than 110%. And that's the balance of assessed divided by sales price when they study all the sales in a given town. And I will note this more on future slides, but we're remarkably close to falling below the threshold that we're required to be at. So these are just the key points from our state audits. So every year, the assessing office and all our data and annual work is audited by Maine Revenue Services. And the actual results of their audit lags 2 years. So their 2024 state valuation preliminary report, which I just received last week, says that as of the 2022 assessment date, so a full year and a half ago, our assessed value ratio, so how the assessments compared to the actual sale prices, was at 72%. That's mostly residential properties. And as you can see, that's dangerously close to that 70% threshold. And I would note that if you see the sale count, that's a lot of sales. So this data is very reliable. We have a high degree of confidence in what these numbers actually mean and that they are valid and reliable because there's so many sales. A small town that only has 50 sales, it might not mean as much, but this means on the whole, this is the trend, and we can put faith in that all properties are under assessed right now. Thus the need for the revaluation. I won't go into the quality rating there for time, but that's actually doing quite well. So that just means everybody's equally low. It's not some people are really low and some people are pretty high. So the exemption effect, I mentioned before that the homestead exemption went down this year. So for the certified ratio that the state has us do at commitment time, it actually allows us to do within 10% of the overall or actual ratio of that sales assessed to sales. So this year we were allowed to certify based on sales from 2 years ago at 94%. So instead of $25,000 homestead, it was $23,500. Each time that goes down, that means you're paying more taxes than you need to, perhaps, that you could have had exempted. Next year, if we were not to partake in a revaluation, the homestead would be below 20,000, and that would keep going down. But if you perform a revaluation, the state allows you to certify at 100%. I just need to submit data to provide insights to them that we are at market value in the coming year again. So what else happens if the assessed values fall behind market values? I've said before, the exemptions continue to be worthless. It's not just the homestead exemption, it's veterans exemption, it's the solar exemption, it's the other exemptions there are, the blind exemption. The business equipment tax exemption reimbursement value drops. And just a quick order of magnitude, approximately $900,000 comes our way every year from that. Well, every 10% that we're off from 100%, we lose about $100,000 in revenue from the state that we would have got otherwise. So if we're at 80% certified ratio, we lose $200,000 we could have had. The state also requires that at tax commitment time, you adjust certain property types that aren't real estate per se, down by the certified ratio. So this year alone, we lost business personal property, $7 million of assessed value, CMP, $3 million of assessed value that we had to reduce because the state assumes if houses are assessed below market value, the other properties that are reporting their current value assets should be reduced as well. So the order of magnitude increases, as you can see, if we didn't do a reval next year at 79% certified ratio, we would lose more taxable assessed value, which would shift the burden on homeowners more so than business entities. And if we do not perform a reval, the tax rate continues to increase versus, as Tom mentioned, If all the value goes up in town, the tax rate will go down significantly, which will balance out that equation of your tax bill. And the longer it goes out of balance, assessed to sales ratio, it's quite possible inequalities between properties could grow because not all properties increase or decrease at the same rate. So some people might be paying more than their fair share if their property hasn't increased as much as other people's.
Seems like a lot of bad news for a town that has property that's appreciating so quickly.
I would say that it's a trend statewide. I can't speak for the country, but it's just the real estate market has been an incredible boom, perhaps unforeseen, at least in the years I've worked in the field. And it just means every town is under assessing unless they're performing a revaluation. And this is just how the law works. And a revaluation is a tool to get us back in alignment. It's not as bad of a thing as people fear it is, because as is the case, the tax bill might not go up as a result. It's just shifting all the values up and the tax rate down to be in alignment with state law.
One thing I will say is that one thing that is particularly harsh to people here is that the folks who rely on a homestead exemption, that went away. It didn't last a year. And it's the same time that at the same time, the state has a budget surplus and there's a statute that requires that they refund that to the taxpayers, and they decided to spend it on something else. So those things really kind of hurt people.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you're speaking of the senior stabilization program. And when people come in, I console and agree with them that it's very unfortunate that that program intended to be as helpful as that didn't last as long as it could have. But unfortunately, that was a state decision, and we were pleased to administer it while we could, but it also brought more people in the door for the local program that didn't know about the local program. And we've signed up dozens of more people as a result of coming in our door for the first time. So
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah. So-
I mean, I would just look at my fellow counselors and say, we might want to look at that local thing too as we move along. So.
I believe a few years ago, it was increased from
Yeah.
650 to 750 at maximum benefit.
Yeah.
And that's what we're administering this year, but it can be looked at whenever you choose in future years. So sales ratio analysis data. And once again, sorry for speed talking here. I'm trying to get people home or on to the next meeting sooner. So for me, just talking about a number doesn't really hit the point home. And I'm a numbers guy, so I can only imagine what regular people would say, what does 70-something% mean? So seeing it visually, 2019, when we had our last revaluation, we were pretty close to market value, and that was the intention. But you see a steady decline, and that's nothing we did wrong. The assessed values have been done the same way. It's the real estate market has changed dramatically, very quickly, but very steadily, and it's statewide, probably beyond state, but I can speak for the state. And you see that although it's kind of flattened out in 2022 towards the end, it continues to decrease slightly, but it's trending below the threshold of the state. And since their audits lag 2 years, it's not like we're currently out of compliance, but we certainly would be as soon as next year. I've run the numbers for where we would be at next year. And I just submitted the audit data for next year's audit to the state this week because I was curious of the number, and it's 62%. So when they do that audit, we would be out of compliance if we don't perform a revaluation. So if the next slide, this is the commercial and industrial properties. And anecdotally, you might have heard from other towns performing revaluations like South Portland, for example, Bangor, for example. They were in the news for the property tax burden is going to shift from commercial to residential because in their instances, the commercial was flatlined and the residential was going up dramatically. Based on this data, it looks like the commercial properties are also under assessed. So although I can't speculate or speak to specifics at this point in time, and I wish I could give people knowledge of what, if any, shift there would be from commercial to residential, I would say, based on the data, it does not look like it'd be anywhere near the order of magnitude of the other towns I mentioned and their issues. And if you go to the next slide.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Sorry, I know you're trying to get through this, but
Yeah.
you talked about residential and commercial. my mother-in-law lives in Cape Elizabeth and she owns a vacant lot
Mhm.
and that got reassessed and the value went up dramatically. Like,
Mhm.
does this also apply to vacant land when you guys do this?
Yes, and it's important to note that it will be all properties. I'll speak to that in a later slide as well, but it's every single property in town, vacant lots, residential, commercial, every property will be reviewed and reassessed. And one thing about the data difference between the residential pictorial and this, the commercial. With the residential, I discussed that I have a high degree of confidence in that data because there's over 400 sales every year. It just means a lot because there's such a high data set to work with. The reason I can't speculate the exact specifics, what we'll see several months from now when I've completed the work, which I've just begun, is because the commercial properties, there's 30 sales a year if we're lucky, and they're not necessarily indicative of all the unsold properties. So until I actually reassess every commercial property with a deep dive, as will be necessary, I can't say that that 64% is actually indicative of all property types. Anecdotally, I would think certain property types or types of commercial are appreciated differently than others. So this just shows that both residential and commercial industrial seem to be underassessed at approximately a similar range. Once again, I said that commercial, I can't speak to with certainty of that number comparatively, but the news likely favorable to a homeowner would be that if this is indicative of all properties going up, that potential shift would be minimized from commercial paying less and residential paying more. And as soon as that is known, months from now, I will make it known to everybody so they can prepare if that is to occur. And I put the question mark on the post reval, what will things go up to? So I say we're bringing assessed values up to market value or more in alignment with market value. But if you go to the next slide, I don't intend to go to 100%. This is not actual data. It's just a bell curve of a normal distribution of what statistics could look like in an ideal situation. And I put 95 there for a reason. If you put 100, it would mean half of the properties are over 100% assessed. And my intention and my methodology dictates we want as few properties as possible to be above 100%. So people might say, well, why don't you just go to 71% so we can be in alignment? Well, because if the market changes at all, we'll be out of compliance once again. And one could say, why don't you go up to 90? Well, there's more of an argument for that, but it just means that if the market continues to shift slowly but surely, we'll lose those exemption amounts and reimbursements. So 95 is more of a safe amount to lay up to 100. So you ensure very few people would be dramatically overassessed or dramatically underassessed while still getting back in compliance for years to come. And then the calculation of the tax rate. This would perhaps be better served with some pictorial versus words, but the budget, all the money that is spent, the appropriations, and all the money that is taken in, the revenues, that determines the net budget or the tax levy. So the tax rate is a function of that number and the total taxable value in town. So all properties have an assessed value. You add that up and they each get their portion of the tax burden to pay based on how much property assessed value they have. So as I said before, and I was asked to repeat, I'll say once again, the exercise of a revaluation is revenue neutral. So if the budget stays the same and all the taxable value in town increases, the tax rate will decrease and likely dramatically by a number of points. And I won't know those specifics for some time either, but as soon as I know them, I will certainly relay them. And this is just a very quick and overly simplified example to hit the point home. It's not real numbers for Scarborough. It's just very round, small numbers. And in this instance, the old values to the new values, let's assume a revaluation occurred in this scenario. All the value in this town doubled. But if everybody's property doubled, yours doubled, mine doubled, that property down the street doubled, your tax bill would be the exact same. because the tax levy stayed the same. So people would say, well, yeah, the budget won't stay the same. And that's up to the will of the council and the school and the county. But all I'm here to say is that the revaluation won't be the reason for an increase in the budget. It assumes the budget is the same. Any above and beyond that is the normal order of business in a given year. If people choose to invest in, things that increase the budget, it won't be due to the revaluation. And here's some actual pictorial kind of illustrations, and there's more of these infographics on the revaluation page of the website. But it's just that if you envision that line that's near each of those little home pictures as the average increase all over town. So let's say the average increase in town after revaluation was 50%. Well, that first one, it's below the average, so their taxes would actually go down. If it's right at the average, their taxes would stay the same. And if it's above the average is 50 and your property went up 60%, your taxes would likely increase. But it's not a large order of magnitude per se. It's just redistributing the existing budget and tax burden based on how out of alignment your assessed value was. And this assumes, no budget change as discussed. And just some concrete examples, a $400,000 home going up 40%, the taxes would actually decrease even though their assessed value went up to 560 because it's below that 50%. And theirs only went up 40%. And then on the next page, it's a little bit different. The same $400,000 range home was under assessed for a while, and theirs went up 60% to 640. It was able to sell for that in the market. So their property value went up 60%. Well, that's more than the 50% average. So their taxes would likely increase now that they're brought up to the correct market value, which was more than the townwide average. And this is just to say that the act of equalization is essential because it's important and it's the law that people pay their fair share. So this realigns that, because if you're dramatically underassessed and someone's pretty accurately assessed, it means you're paying less than your fair share or vice versa. And it just ensures that that is done correctly and equitably. And one point I wanted to say about the word equalization, because it's been on a couple slides now. There's some textbook terms or assessing specific terms like equalization, like statistical market update. And those are perhaps more correct than a revaluation, in a textbook. But I was very mindful to call it a revaluation because that's what people know. And I think it's important to be frank and real with people and call it by the thing they remember it from the last time, even though it might have a negative connotation. I believe that the Scarborough taxpayers deserve that upfront and honesty, that it is similar to the thing that happened in 2019. It's the same mechanism, even though we intend to do it differently. And they deserve advance notice, even if it's unfavorable or unpopular news. They deserve advance notice and clarification on what it means for them.
One thing I was going to mention here, are you going to wrap up? But I had a quick question for you at the end.
2 or 3 more slides.
Oh, I'll let you go.
Okay, thanks. So as I said before, the last town reevaluation was actually in 2018 and 19 performed by an outside company, KRT Appraisal. So the 18 was the commercial industrial and the 19 was residential. I believe that was done for time constraints or other reasons, but we're doing it differently this time. And some of the key ways in which we're going to do it differently in 2024 is it's 5 years from the last one. So we've determined that it needs to be done more often than every 15 years. There's actually some regulations that say it should be done every 10 years. So we kind of split the difference and we've waited till we felt that the staff was ready to do it because we are going to perform it in-house. So we've been preparing and making sure the data that we're working with is accurate. We've been studying to learn the methodology and the software, and we're ready. And that saves the taxpayers a lot of money on the cost of hiring an outside company. But more importantly, we believe we'll be able to control our destiny and our time frame and provide better customer service. It's not to slight other companies, but we know Scarborough better than somebody that's just coming in here for 6 months. And we're proud to be able to do the work, and we've been ramping up to it quietly but diligently. And one way we're able to do that is we no longer need to go door to door and in your house. People call me and say, I heard there's a reval. Are you going to come to my house and bug me? And I said, only if you want me to. So the gist is, because the measure and list of every home was done in 2019, we don't need to do it again. And furthermore, because we've been so mindful, we've actually improved the data since then. Because if we measured your house wrong, you let us know. And we went and measured it again, we fixed it. We've had 4 years to get the data even better than it was in 19. And we don't have to do that part of it again. And of course, if you get to the point where you get your hearing notice several months from now, and you'll be given time to review it, and you say, you still have something wrong, we'll work with you and we'll come up, but we're not going to knock on your door and come unannounced, any of that this time around. It's not necessary, fortunately. And we're going to do all property classes. We don't intend to just do part of town or just certain property types. We will do them all. And we believe that's the best scenario, and we're happy to do it. So 2 of the key things we're going to do differently is increase the time for review compared to the last time. And we're going to do more public outreach. I've heard it mentioned in passing that other towns have had revaluations and they've been in the news. Because it's not a Scarborough specific issue that our assessed values are out of alignment with market values that have skyrocketed, it seems. Other towns have been in the news for having to perform revaluations even earlier than us, because they hadn't done one as recently. And they've mostly been criticized for not giving time to review, so giving people notices a week before their bill, or not having time to review it themselves. Like, honestly, I believe we could have done better last time if we had the data for months to review. I wasn't the assessor yet, but that's what I've been told and I believe to be true. And then furthermore, public outreach. People deserve to know whatever we know as soon as we know it, and not be shocked or surprised along the way last minute. So we're dedicated to that. And then I'll continue to gloss over perhaps quickly, but we're gonna, in the next couple months, perform the final steps of data review. So cleaning our data to make it more accurate and on par with like properties. So we'll look at the grade of properties, the renovation or style of where a property is at in terms of its updates over time, the impact of the neighborhood or a view or proximity to things, and the contributory value of smaller extra features to ensure they actually need to be assessed if they are or aren't, or if they give more or less value to a property. And then once that is completed, the final cleaning of the data and making it as accurate before we do statistical analysis on it, we will do the 3 models of assessed methodology. And I will save that for another presentation at another time, because that's a whole other topic. But we will use every method available and industry standards. We will send preliminary new values up to people months ahead of time, as early as May or as late as June, which leaves months before tax commitment to talk to me and review. And we will have time for hearings for people to meet with us and review their assessments and other people's assessments before we commit values in August of next year. And this is says the same thing. And this project schedule went out on that mailer to everybody, but it just says, although you continue to hear from the town and the assessing staff through various channels, the next time that you'll be highly involved and we'll need your help in working with us will be around May or June, when you'll get your hearings and you'll have time to meet with us and help us correct the data one last time before assessments are finalized. And as I said before, we've prioritized public communication. We'll continue to do so through all these channels, and we will continue to hit home the point that the revaluation section of the website is dedicated and will continue to have new content, and I would drive you there already. And those are just pictures of examples of what are on there. You can go look at them. And what's next? As I said, we'll continue to review our data before we dig in on the analysis and changing our tables. December, I propose that if the council is willing, I check in again on a status update, and we'll continue to reach out to people and keep them abreast of where we're at with everything, so they feel they're in on the process and it's transparent.
Thank you, Nick. I know Councilor Hamel, you had a
Quick
question.
question. So this discussion and sort of having this back to back with the Downs review, I think is excellent. But it highlights for me the fact that it's fish and fowl. These are two different things, you know. We're talking about the value of, you know, how great it is that our tax, you know, that our tax base is increasing. Well, great, thanks a lot. My tax bill's going up. Now, I know that we're talking about the benefit between, you know, of softening that increase because of what we're doing with the CEA, but would there be an opportunity for us to try to talk about these two, you know, east versus west on this thing? We're not a business, okay? So the way that he measures performance and success, we don't have that thing. You know, our revenues are taxes. And, you know, you have a slide in there that talks about appropriations minus revenues equals levy. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'd like to learn a lot more about that, you know, and how that compares and contrasts. I think that's part of the reason why we can't reconcile the respective benefits and the mutuality of the CEA. I really think that's a central misunderstanding or lack of understanding.
Sure. Please know that although it won't be this evening for the time involved, I'm happy to come to finance committee meetings or council meetings at your and town leadership's discretion to explain it in the coming weeks and months.
Great. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, awesome job. Yeah. All right, so we want to take a quick 5 minute, 1 minute.
It's about to get very, very
Yeah.
rocky. I can hear them coming.
Quick 2 minute recess and then we'll get started.
Thank you.
Okay, 5 Right, today is September 20th, 2023. This is the regularly scheduled town council meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. Will everybody please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance? All right. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 3 is roll call. Tody, would you mind taking the roll, please?
Counselor Snyder?
Here.
Counselor Tucci?
Here.
Counselor Stew?
Here.
Counselor McGee?
Here.
Counselor Hamel?
Here.
Counselor Katarina?
Here,
And Chairman Anderson?
Here.
All present, thank you.
All right, item number 4 is general public comment. So is there anybody who would like to make a comment on anything not on the agenda? If you could come to the podium. Okay, I see no public comment, so I'm closing public comment. Item number 5 is minutes. Can I get a motion?
so moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Counselor Hamel?
Yes, there were a couple things I'd like to comment on. Number one, Allison Bristol's name is misspelled, so if that could be please corrected. And the other thing I was going to mention is that we have long segments in there where we've just included, verbatim commentary. So I know part of it was due to something I read into the record that was requested by a resident. But is that typical? I mean, it just seems like these are voluminous, and if this is going to be the trend, maybe we just write whatever is recorded. I'm confused by that.
I think the bulk of the meeting minutes are the ordinances that we had to put in. I think there was one that the planning director, and it was numerous pages long. So if a resident asks that something be entered into the record, then it's made part of the record,
Yeah.
or even a counselor.
So I know to that point, I just want to make sure that we had a fairly extensive commentary in support of the purchase option agreement. So I understand that vote was 6-1, but I think there should be commentary that conveyed the opposite position. So I don't know exactly how to get that in there, but I believe that should be included.
So I think Counselor Hamel, maybe if you wanted to provide your comments for the record, I think that could be something that you could provide to Tody and she could
I'll do
include them
that.
in the minutes.
It's hard for me to do it from memory just now, but I'll come back.
Well, it's
Thank you.
recorded, so you can transcribe it and go from there.
Thanks very much.
Right? So with that, all those in favor of the minutes? All right, unanimous. Next is item 6, adjustments to the agenda. I have 2 recommendations. So the first one is in recognition of the special guests we have here tonight. I would propose that we move Resolution 23-004, act on the request to approve Resolution 23-004 in recognition of the U11 Little League Baseball League team winning the All-Star State Championship. And I propose that we move that before the town manager's report. Can I get a second?
Second,
Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, and then my second motion would be to remove all 3 proclamations, Proclamation 23-004 through Proclamation 23-006 to follow after the town manager's report. Any discussion, or can I get a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. All right, so with that, we're moving on to item number 7, items to be signed, treasurer's warrants. So I signed those, they're here. So now moving on to Resolution 23-004, act on the request to approve Resolution 23-004 in recognition of the U11 Little League Baseball League team winning the All-Star State Championship. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Counselor Seither, who's sponsoring this.
Sometimes being a counselor is really fun. What an honor it is to recognize these athletes who have joined us here tonight. 3 of the 7 counselors sitting here have had the pleasure of watching you play many, many games of baseball this past season. With that, I would like to take a minute to read the following resolution. When I reach the end of the resolution and I begin to call the team's names and coaches, I'm going to have you guys please come up along the side. You'll receive a pin from the town council chair, and then I'm going to have you line up in front of where we're all sitting here, okay? So with that, Resolution 23 004. 11U Boys All-Star Little League Baseball Team. Be it resolved by the Council of the Town of Scarborough, Maine, in Town Council assembled, that whereas Little League Baseball is a program of service to the youth of our community, dedicated to teaching sportsmanship and the competitive will to win, as well as furthering physical fitness and well-being through helpful community activity to provide valuable training for the participants and the entertainment of your spectators. And whereas the town of Scarborough has one of the largest Little League programs in the state of Maine and competes in District 6, which includes some of the best Little League baseball and softball teams in the state of Maine. And whereas the Scarborough 11U Boys All-Star Baseball Team endured daily practices in preparation, including in the rain, to compete against a variety of teams in District 6, including last year's District 6 10U Boys All-Star champions from Portland. And whereas the Scarborough 11U Boys All-Star Baseball Team competed well in the District 6 tournament and ended up competing against Portland in the championship game. Scarborough prevailed and beat Portland, winning the 2023 11U District 6 Boys All-Star Baseball Championship. And whereas the Scarborough 11U Boys All-Star Baseball Team advanced to the 11U State Championship in Augusta, Maine, compete against the other district champions in the state. The boys went undefeated, averaged 15 runs each game, allowing 6 runs total in the state tournament, and was named the 2023 11U Boys All-Star State Champions. Whereas the Scarborough 11U Boys All-Star Baseball Team was invited to a regional Little League tournament in Beverly, Massachusetts, the boys beat Vermont and New Hampshire, but fell to Massachusetts in a 1-run game. While the boys failed to advance to the semifinals game, they had a great time with their teammates and were able to interact with athletes from New England and the Mid-Atlantic states who participated in the tournament. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Scarborough Town Council in council assembled that the following members of the 11U Boys All-Star Baseball Team and their coaches are hereby recognized for the great honor that they have brought their team, their families, and the town of Scarborough. Our athletes are Cole Aventaggio, Sean Bailey, Henry Burke, Leon Clark, Leo DeSoto, Edwin Duquette, Easton Groshon, Wyatt Laughlin, Mason McGuire, Reed Nelson, Nathan Chevry, and Benjamin Weimer. Manager Mark Chevry. Assistant coaches Justin Groshon. And Tony DeSoto. Signed and sealed this 20th day of September 2023 on behalf of the Scarborough Town Council and the Town Manager of Scarborough, Maine. Congratulations, guys. Right, Counselor, coming in.
I'm good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, congrats. That's exciting.
Great job. Thanks again. Bye, guys.
Boy.
Good job. See ya. You're welcome. Getting some special high fives, Tom. Yeah, I know. I was gonna say, can I get a motion to adjourn? I was just kidding. Yeah. Counselor McGee?
Yeah, thank you. It is wonderful. And Counselor Seidler, thank you for bringing that forward. I just want to say that that group, the kids, the parents, the coaches, I've worked with that organization with top notch. And those kids, it's the sky's the limit. That they're 11-year-olds, can't wait to see what they do next year as 12-year-olds. And then even future as they go in through our JV and varsity programs. It's a great future baseball here in Scarborough. So very
Yep.
proud of all of them.
Great.
And had the privilege to coach many of them. So
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
All right. So with all that excitement, moving on to item number 8, town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a number of items to report. I believe Liam can pull this up just to help guide me. With respect to the school building project, it continues to be very busy for staff, helping support the efforts. Personally, I've been involved in further exploring different easterly or northerly access points to the school site. I had the pleasure of working with Councilor Clucci, excuse me, and our consultants and some other property owners to see if there's other access points, maybe as all the way out to Gorham Road, and that's worthy of further exploration. I've also had the occasion to communicate directly with the residents of Trackview Terrace. That's an area that's been kind of identified right along as an access point that needs to be understood. We've also engaged the town attorney to do a full title search, so we fully understand kind of the ownership and legal rights and interests of that area in particular. And we've promised to those homeowners that we would share the results of that with them when we have it in a couple of weeks or so. With respect to Sawyer Road improvements, the school building committee itself has done a series of Q&A sessions. I believe they're holding at least 2, if not 3 a week. One of the sessions kind of the town has taken over, and that is to talk about Sawyer Road. And I guess we're involved because we're doing direct reach out to all those that live on Sawyer Road or access their homes off Sawyer Road. So there's, I think, Todia, 250 letters will be going out, advising them of a work session, if you will, on October 10th. It will be 7 p.m. over at the classroom of the Public Safety Building. Again, there'll be direct invites out to these folks, but it's of course open to the public as well. And I think Sawyer Road has been singled out as that's been a point of some interest, and we want to make sure that we give it proper attention in terms of what the initial thinking is to upgrade that road. Also, as the council's aware, we are moving methodically through kind of the buyer's obligations under the option agreement. A number of items are coming through the council at this point. Others have started at the planning board and will be coming back to you at some point. So we're under a commitment to move through a series of obligations by the end of October. And so we do need to have some fairly deliberate speed and cadence to move it through our normal adoption process. So staff will be doing its part to help shepherd those things forward. I'm pleased to report some kind of late breaking news. As the council and perhaps the public's aware, we have been making arrangements to go out and sell general obligation bonds. It was about a $9.6 million bond issue. Essentially, it was a combination of a number of capital investments over 2 different fiscal years. We took a year off, if you will. And so as part of that process, we need to go back out to the bond rating agencies to have our bond rating again considered. And we've done that. I'm pleased to report that Moody's and Standard & Poor's have both affirmed our ratings. And I would characterize both of those credit reports as being stable outlook. Worth noting, Moody's, if you look simply at the metrics in their analytical approach to calculating our bond rating, it actually suggests we should be going up one notch. But the analyst chose to keep us where we are. I say that is very good news, given the fact that we've had very detailed conversations and full disclosure with the agencies of the impending $160 million bond issue that's going to the voters in the fall. And so there was keen awareness, and it's probably too strong to say that they fully considered the impact, but they're certainly aware of it. And they certainly would have expressed some concern, particularly with outlook with that knowledge. So I feel as though we've passed a bit of a pressure test in that regard. The other piece I want to report is that this morning, about midday, we did receive 5 bids for the sale of those general obligation bonds. Very pleased to report that the bids were very tightly packed within a couple of tenths of a percent of each other, which gives us a pretty good level of comfort and high degree of confidence of the competitive nature of that sale. The low bid, forgive me, is Robert W. Baird and Company Incorporated, and the true interest cost of that low bid is 3.53%. And I mentioned that because that's obviously very important, and for purposes of many of our discussions around debt and borrowing, we've been carrying the number of 4%. So I'm feeling good that we're have been reasonably conservative in that number in those discussion points. I will say there was some level of bid premium associated with this low bid, about $650,000 or so. We chose to use that to pay off the cost of issuance of the bond issue, and then kind of buy down and reduce the total amount of borrowing. So the total amount that we'll be borrowing is just over $9,034,000. Pleased to go into any of these details, any of these matters in more detail with the full council or the finance committee as you wish. But we'll make all of the materials available for public review as well.
May I ask a quick question on the one, Mr. Chair? Quick one. Tom, on the potential upgrade that was not received, what was the reason given for not increasing our rating?
I say potential upgrade. I direct your attention to page 6 of the Moody's report. And again, we can go into more detail. This is what their own internal methodology for calculating what rating should be. And it's under their rating methodology. The scorecard actually indicates an outcome of AA2, and we're AA3, yet the analyst chose to stay at 3. And perhaps they are considering any number of factors, including the potential additional debt coming at us.
But they didn't state it. They didn't.
They didn't state as such. They do provide some insight in terms of going forward, from an outlook point of view, in terms of what challenges could lead to a downgrade, and conversely, what could lead us to an upgrade. And I think those are something that we ought to pay very close attention to.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thanks.
With respect to the Eastern Trail Close of the Gap project, again, this is a standing item. Often I don't have too much to report. I did hold a check-in meeting with all kind of the critical stakeholders last week. It was good to get back together. We've recommitted to doing it on a every other week basis. So I'm the coordinating person for that, so I'll do that. We also are making final arrangements to make resubmission to DEP and Army Corps. We needed to refresh our permits, and that will be going in next week. With regard to construction, Gorham Road, as I think we've all perhaps have witnessed by now, is for all intents and purposes done. There'll be some work that is done in the spring when they relocate a utility pole, but for all intents and purposes, that road is good to go at this point. Mitchell Hill Road project is also kind of wrapped up and in very good shape. We just started the Spur Rink Road project that is fully active at this point, making very, very good progress, and very limited complaints, at least have come to my attention. So very pleased, things are moving ahead. And East Grand Paving, this is a DOT project. That work, the preparation work is still underway. I believe they're planning on doing the milling of the pavement at the end of this week, perhaps, and then they'll be paving thereafter. The Ad Hoc Community Center Committee, I'll just simply report, and I suspect either Councilors Katarina or Shoup will provide more detail. They did meet for their inaugural meeting last week. They were successful in electing the chair. And I'll stop there and I'll allow councilors to comment further since they were part of that meeting. With respect to Avenue 2, this is a matter that I know Councilor Hamel, even before he was a councilor, was very actively involved with and continues to be active and interested. I did convene a meeting of the parties, I'll call them, or the key stakeholders. There's still a bit of uncertainty as to what Mr. Gendron intends to do with, I'll call it the southerly path. This is kind of the area from through the grass area, if you will, to the beach. And a lot of that will depend in terms of how he positions himself and what permits he chooses to seek in terms of how other parties kind of react. So I would characterize us in a bit of a watch period, if you will. There was a fence erected on the property line that did go through all the state permit processes and local approval processes, and appears quite to be done quite tastefully with minimizing any vegetative damage as well.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Tom for his, support in this area, and also staffer Angela Blanchette. We're right on top of it, and even though some work has begun, it's pretty clear they won't be able to touch the pine trees that are mature pine trees that Pine Point has been named after. And there are other things that they'll be required to do in order to comply with implementing the movement of the path on the northerly part of the path. And on the other part of the path, that's a southerly part that goes into the primary dune, is even going to be more stringent state review of that, and unlikely that they'll, hopefully with any luck, that they'll be able to move the path that's there naturally. So, but it's a tricky area with a lot of complexity, but Tom's done a great job of navigating it and providing support to help us get out in front of it in the last stages.
Yep, we'll continue to stay on top as best we can. Also want to update the council and the public on the purchase of new piers, new cranes, excuse me, at the pier. This is at Pine Point. This is a matter that was funded in the FY24 budget. We were delayed a bit, just chasing down. It's fairly specialized work, finding qualified vendors and getting actually responses back from them. At long last, we have that. We have awarded the contract, and I expect by early October, those cranes will be installed and operational. We will coordinate closely with the commercial fishermen who depend and use that pier. And I have no doubt that we'll be able to do that so it doesn't interrupt their activities. With respect to the Gorham Connector project, things are ramping up. I expect the Turnpike Authority will be making some more public announcements and involvement in the fall. I know Councilor Katarina, really as a resident, not a councilor, participated in a video kind of just to explain her experience living in the shadow of the North Scarborough, dealing with just traffic congestion for decades. For my part, I was asked to provide a bit of I guess, a narration to a video that will be produced. So quite uncomfortable, out of my comfort zone. They didn't tell me what I was in for until I was seated with the camera rolling, and at any rate, interested and pleased to be part of that process. And lastly, I think the assessor made mention to it, the short-lived state tax stabilization program. So 1 year and it's done. But just to report on our results, Nick and his staff just submitted reimbursement to the state. We had 1,835 applicants, qualified applicants for that program. And we have sought reimbursement for $412,522. And I'm certain one of the reasons that it was so short-lived is that the state terribly underestimated the fiscal notice attached. I want to think that they were expecting about 1.5 million statewide. And I just mentioned that Scarborough alone is over $400,000. I guess last, just to look ahead, we do have a impact fee workshop scheduled for October 4th. Myself and I believe hopefully Karen and Autumn in the audience will be part of that, as will Angela Blanchette. Norman and myself will be in a position to provide financial report that's a bit further look at the close of FY23 and Q1 look at FY24. And also provide a town council goals update at that meeting. So I'll be busy between now and then. Thank you.
Any questions for Tom? No? All right. So now moving on to Proclamation 23-004, act on the request to approve Proclamation 23-004, recognizing the month of September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. So Tom and I were actually approached back in August by a resident to approve this proclamation, and we just couldn't get it on the agenda in time. And so we wanted to get it on tonight. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to comment on this item? All right, if you come up to the podium, if you just state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to talk. Yep.
Hey, everyone. My name's Taryn Jarbo. I live at 123 Spurwink Road in Scarborough. Right where the construction's happening, and it's not bothersome at all.
Remember, I said no complaints have been received.
No
so far.
complaints, no complaints. Thank you to the board for taking the time to sign and acknowledge this proclamation. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm grateful to be standing in front of all of you. This is my daughter, our daughter. Actually, our kids are running around, being disruptive. But this is our daughter, June. June was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, which is a solid tumor cancer, when she was 8 months old, actually in May of 2020. The thought it could be cancer never crossed my mind as her mother. I soon came to learn that there are 47 children every day that are diagnosed with cancer. That is 329 children a week in the United States. 1 in 260 children are diagnosed before their 20th birthday. When we found out it was likely cancer, we also found out that Maine Children's Cancer Program, one of 2 pediatric oncology cancer clinics, is located right here in Scarborough, actually only a 1.5 miles up the road. So Scarborough resident, and we would take our daughter June for treatments at the clinic. When we were told that June had neuroblastoma, we were also told there was only one treatment plan, which is to throw the entire kitchen sink at her. We don't know why children get cancer, and we don't know what works best in treating them. So why, for example, did June's 18-month treatment consisting of 5 rounds of chemo, a tandem stem cell transplant, a massive surgery to remove the tumor, and months of radiation and immunotherapy, why does that work for some children and why didn't it work for June? June completed 10 months of treatment. She was determined to be cancer-free around 6 months into it. And then the cancer suddenly returned, and it took her life only days after we found out that it was back. She was only 1.5 years old. In the last 20 years, only 4 new drugs have been approved by the FDA to treat specifically childhood cancer. June had lost nearly 60% of her hearing during treatment. Had she survived treatment, she would have been infertile, unable to ever bear children of her own. She would have entered menopause at age 10. She would be at a much higher risk for a secondary cancer. More than 95% of childhood cancer survivors experience exactly these symptoms. And it's a result of the treatment toxicity. Standing here today is an opportunity for me as a mother of a child who died of cancer to spread awareness and to honor our June. She wasn't the first, and she will not be the last, and it's up to us as her village to unify and advocate and spread awareness. Children are dying every day from this disease, and as a nation, we allocate little funds for research. June would have turned 3 years old on Friday, September 22nd. In honor of her life and in honor of the lives of children and their families affected by this devastating disease, I stand before you asking you all to help me in raising awareness, not only during this month of September, but for the entire year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comment. Right, so I'm gonna read the proclamation. So whereas the month of September is designated as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and serves as an outlet to honor the young I'm sorry, I can't. Do you mind trying to read it?
I'm not sure if I could do any better.
I just need to.
See. Whereas the month of September is designated as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and serves as an outlet to honor the young lives taken too soon, and as a means to increase public awareness of this disease affecting children across the United States. And whereas childhood cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children, with 1 in 260 children in the United States being diagnosed by their 20th birthday. And whereas the average age of diagnosis is 6 years old, compared to 66 years for adults cancer, 80% of childhood cancer patients are diagnosed late and with metastatic disease. And whereas in 2023, 47 children per day, or 17,293 children aged 0 to 19, were diagnosed with cancer in the US. More than 95% of childhood cancer survivors will have chronic health conditions as a result of their treatment toxicity, with 1/4 being classified as severe to life-threatening. And whereas approximately 1/2 of childhood cancer families rate the associated financial toxicity due to out-of-pocket expenses as considerable to severe. And whereas in the last 20 years, only 4 new drugs have been approved by the FDA to specifically treat childhood cancer. And whereas recognizing the unique research needs of childhood cancer and the associated need for increased funding is critical to allow healthcare professionals to work diligently, dedicating their expertise to treat and cure children with cancer. And whereas many parents and family members feel terrified and are overwhelmed following a child's cancer diagnosis, therefore, it is important to encourage additional nonprofit organizations at the local and national level to assist children with cancer and their families in coping through the educational, emotional, and financial support. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Scarborough Town Council and the town manager that the town of Scarborough does hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the town of Scarborough. And I encourage citizens, government agencies, private businesses, nonprofit organizations, the media, and other interested groups to increase awareness of what citizens can do to support the fight against childhood cancer. Signed and sealed this 29th day of August, 2023, on behalf of the Scarborough Town Council and the Town Manager of Scarborough, Maine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for coming and bringing this to our attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, next is proclamation 23-005. Act on the request to approve proclamation 23-005, recognizing the month of September as well as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. So we also similarly had a resident come forward proposing this. I want to see, is there anybody in the audience who would like to talk to this one? No? All right, so with that, I'm gonna read. Oh, is there someone online? Nope. All right, so I'm gonna read the proclamation, or can I get a motion?
Second.
All right. So whereas prostate cancer is the most commonly diagnosed form of cancer and the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths among men, and whereas this year approximately 288,300 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in the United States alone this year, and roughly 34,700 will die this year from the disease, which is 1 man every 15 minutes. And whereas 1 in 8 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer, African-American men are the highest risk for the disease with a rate of 1 in 7 men. African-American men are 2.1 times more likely to die from the disease. And whereas education regarding prostate cancer and early detection strategies is critical to saving lives and preventing and protecting our families. And whereas all men are at risk for prostate cancer, we encourage the citizens of Scarborough to increase the importance of prostate screenings. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Scarborough Town Council and the Town Manager that the Town of Scarborough does hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Signed, sealed this day, the 20th of September 2023, on behalf of the Scarborough Town Council and the Town Manager of Scarborough, Maine. All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous. All right, next up is proclamation 23-006. Act on the request to approval proclamation 23-006 to declare October 1st as Sustainable Scarborough Day. And I believe where we have the presence of the Sustainability Committee Chair, who I think may say a few words.
I'll be brief. I know how long meetings work. Good evening. My name's Rick Meinking and I reside at 23 Hearn Road. I am here this evening representing the Sustainability Committee to officially announce, before you tonight is a proclamation to officially announce Scarborough's first annual Sustainability Day that will be held on October 1st, starting at 10 a.m. on the grounds of the Wentworth Intermediate School and the Scarborough Library. The idea of the Sustainability Scarborough Day was sparked by the Sustainability Committee and the Conservation Commission as a way to educate community members about the efficiency incentives available as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, as most people know it as. We hope residents find this day informative and return home with valuable DIY, or that's known as do-it-yourself, low-cost steps that will help reduce household expenses and lead the way to a more sustainable community. With the influx of valuable resources from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, financial support and tax credits will entice homeowners and renters with cost-effective solutions. It's a great time for sustainable Scarborough to bring these opportunities to the dinner table discussion. Over the last 6 months, Jamie Fitch, Scarborough's Sustainability Coordinator, worked tirelessly with the Sustainability Committee, Conservation Commission, the School Department, the Library, and Public Works to put together a jam-packed event that will feature guest speakers, local companies that offer products and services to homeowners to save energy, protect the environment, and enhance the resiliency of Scarborough's built environment and its natural resources. There will even be electric vehicles and bicycles to test drive, and a couple of food trucks with offering tasty delights. To top it all off, one lucky Scarborough resident will win a free heat pump water heater. And if you don't know what that looks like, it's right out in the hallway. Courtesy of FW Webb, a local plumbing and heating product supplier. On behalf of the Sustainability Committee, we wish to express our thanks to the town council, the town staff, for their commitment and support of Scarborough's first annual Sustainability Day. We hope to see you there on October 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. All right, can I get a motion?
Second.
All right, so I'm gonna read this proclamation, whereas Scarborough citizens value being good stewards of their town and surroundings. And whereas using our local resources wisely, creating livable communities and encouraging healthy neighborhoods helps provide sustainable environments for all Scarborough citizens in perpetuity. And whereas all people, regardless of race, gender, religion, income, or geography, have a right to a healthy, sustainable environment with economic growth and opportunity. And whereas we are all caretakers of our planet and have an obligation to combat climate change and environmental degradation to preserve the Earth's beauty and resources. And whereas we are committed to expanding our understanding and knowledge of sustainable living practices, now therefore be it resolved that the Scarborough Town Council and the Town Manager do hereby proclaim October 1st as Sustainable Scarborough Day and encourage the citizens of Scarborough join environmental advocates, businesses, and residents at Sustainable Scarborough Day festivities at Whitmore School to learn about, celebrate, and promote conservation and sustainability. Signed and sealed this 20th day of September 2023 on behalf of the Scarborough Town Council and the Town Manager of Scarborough, Maine. All right, all those in favor? All right, unanimous. Thank you, Rick. We're looking forward to joining you. All right, moving on to order number 23-095, 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the new request for cannabis establishment license from Cesar Napolitano, Perry Higgins, and April Arasati, Core Empowerment MEP LLC, located at 11 Washington Ave, Unit 1 for an adult cannabis products manufacturing facility. Chris McNeil, Coastal Kitchen LLC, located at 3 Commercial Road, Suite 7A for an adult cannabis products manufacturing facility. Chris McNeil Coastal Lab LLC, located at 3 Commercial Road, Suite 1A for an adult cannabis products manufacturing facility. This is being brought forward by the Assistant Town Manager, Liam.
Thank you. All 3 of these licenses, again, they're at 2 separate locations. It looks like a duplicate. One is for a lab operation, one is for a kitchen or confectionery operation. They've been inspected. There are no concerns with staff. Staff recommends approval.
Great. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? This is a public hearing. All right, I'm seeing nobody in the room and nobody online, so I'm closing the public hearing. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Next is order number 23-096, 7 p.m. public hearing and second reading on the proposed amendments to chapter 1301, the General Assistance Ordinance pursuant to Title 22 MRSA 4305. This was something that was on our last agenda, and this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? I'm seeing no comments in the room or online. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Next is order number 23-099, 7 o'clock p.m. public hearing and second reading to adopt the proposed new chapter 617, sex offender residency restriction ordinance. This is being brought forward by the police chief, and we discussed it at our last meeting. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? I'm seeing no comments in the room or online. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
I would just say that we did receive, John and I received some positive feedback from a resident this week who was really grateful for the work. And so I just wanted to pass that along to the rest of the council because it was to just John and I.
Yep. And I just want to thank the police chief, the police staff, ordinance for moving this so quickly. So I appreciate the work here. All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Next is order number 23-101, public hearing and action on the renewal request for junkyard permits pursuant to Title 30A MRSA Chapter 183, A Gagnon or E Perry Iron and Metal located at Rigby Road, Speedway Auto located at 343 Payne Road, and SVR New England LP Scarborough Recycling located at 40 Holmes Road. This is being brought forward by the town clerk. Tody?
This is an annual renewal that has to be done. The applications are on file in the office. They were inspected. You have a memo from the zoning administrator indicating that the locations appear to be in compliance with all state and local ordinances applicable to the use activities for which they're seeking the license renewal. And we recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Tody? No? Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? I'm seeing nobody in the room or online. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? No? All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Next is order number 23-102, public hearing and action on the new request for combined massage establishment, massage therapist licenses from Pamela Land, Massage by Pamela Land, located at 4 Stewart Drive, Unit 2. This is being brought forward by the town clerk.
As it indicates, it's a new application. The application has been vetted and we recommend approval.
All right, are there any questions for Tody? Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? Seeing no comments, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? No, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Next is order number 23-103, public hearing and action on the request for a new food handler's license from Cesar Napolitano, Perry Higgins, and April Arasati, Core Empowerment MEP LLC located at 11 Washington Ave, Unit 1, and Costco Wholesale number 1657 located at 455 Scarborough Downs Road.
These are new applications. They all meet the establishments were inspected, and Costco is still under construction. However, we recommend approval of all, and once they get the occupancy permit, we'll issue the vendor's licenses.
All right, is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? Seeing nobody in the public or online, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? No, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, moving on to new business, order number 23-014, first reading and refer to the planning board, the proposed amendments to chapter 405 zoning ordinance section 20.c crossroads plan developments, subsection D2 plan developments. This is being brought forward by the planning director. Autumn?
Thank you. This is part of the agreement for the school purchase, it's part of the option period. So this text amendment would reduce the 100-foot buffer that is currently required between the CPD district and all adjacent residential districts. The proposal is to reduce that to 15 feet for municipal uses and for residential uses. The 100-foot buffer would be maintained for all non-residential uses. I can answer any questions you have about that. The residential district or natural resource district is in existence. The natural resource district that we have in place is our resource protection district. The CPD is not adjacent to that in any location, but if that were to be added somewhere, this would still apply.
Great. Are there any questions for Autumn? Councilor Clucci?
So what's the buffer between rural farming, which I think is Warren Woods is rural farming, right?
Rural farming, correct.
What's the buffer requirement there? Is there one?
Between, right now, there's a 100-foot buffer required. Well, for a residential district, rural farming would fall into that residential
does,
district.
okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
So one other question, I think you responded to an email, but just to clarify, when we say residential use, that includes multifamily and condos, and so
Yes.
I know there's some
Yes.
confusion with.
Some difference with assessing,
Yes.
right? But for land use, it's residential would be any type of residential use.
Councilor Hamel?
Process question on this one. I attended the planning board meeting on Monday, and I believe the agenda that was sent out last week I don't believe this was in that agenda, so there was an agenda change. How, I don't believe we were notified of that. The council,
For the planning board?
for this particular item.
You may be talking, the zoning map change and the
Yes.
text amendments follow two different processes.
Okay,
So they will come back to you together in October, but they went separate, because the zoning map change starts with a recommendation from the planning board first
okay,
before it gets to you. Whereas the text amendments still follow the process where they come before you for first reading, and then you refer it to the planning board, and then it comes back.
but you haven't received the planning board,
No, sir.
okay,
This has
so.
not been in front of the
it's
planning
separate
board yet.
Action item,
So this is a action to send it to the planning board.
okay.
So once it's just a different process between the
Yes.
two pieces, which I'm not sure why we have two separate processes, but the zoning map change goes to them first.
It's my fault.
This goes, yeah, this comes.
When we wrote the zoning map change earlier in the year, we did it so that it had to go to planning board first.
Okay, great. I'm feeling much better because I know there were at least 3 other issues that were discussed at length.
Correct.
And I thought I had missed a page, so thank you.
I have one more question, I guess. So the option agreement was specific to VR4, but this is a little more generic where it's any residential district. I think it's a moot point, but I just wanted to see if you could speak to, it looks like anything that abuts like the R1 or 2 is already developed. So
Right.
I don't
It's
know.
the
that-
VR4, I think that would have the most impact.
All right. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? No? All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All right, any discussion? Counselor Gucci?
So I'm uneasy about this one because there's just there's such a broad array of uses that are allowed in the CPD, even just for residential. And I see that, you know, if I look up, it appeases one of my concerns was that we have a 6-story apartment building next to a single family home on, on a planned subdivision. You can't do that because there's some height restrictions within 150 feet. So that eases that. But I'm also not a deep expert in all this stuff. So I'm going to be very interested to hear what the planning board has to say about if there's, additional conditions or constraints that we might want to work around this to ensure that the uses are compatible and that we're protecting Warren Woods particularly. And then I think you can, I'm not opposed to giving more flexibility to a developer. I think we heard him say earlier that he's not looking to build more than 2,000 units in the entire development. I think we should maybe try to work that in here somewhere. Just the density allowances alone for these acres that we're rezoning. I know it's 20 units versus 4, but it's really, if they're 1 bedrooms, I think it's 40 units that they can build in CPD, right? Because they have
The density factors.
the density factors. So that's thousands of units that we're allowing here. I don't think he intends to build it. So why don't we try to work that in somehow, some kind of cap on the number of units in CPD? I know we've talked about it in the past, but I think the timing might be about right to consider that.
Counselor Hamel?
Yeah, I still have an issue with this, I think, and that is that normally the developer is the one that's bringing the action forward. Now, I understand from the planning board meeting on those other questions, on Monday, the board said this is not precedent setting because the town has in fact brought things forward in the past. But I understand that was only in the case of town-owned land. So I have a similar issue with this that I have with the others, and that is we're not only carrying the ball, we're blocking, for a developer that should be bringing this forward, not the town. I got a problem with that. So anyway, I just thought thank you for clarifying that it's different, but I have the same issue that was raised and discussed in a related review by the planning board that this has not had yet.
Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, I have a few questions potentially, but I would remind my fellow counselors that this is the first reading and it's to refer it to the planning board. And then once we get more information and whatnot, we can vote to move forward or not. But I certainly will vote to support to move this forward to the planning board tonight.
Counselor Seither?
Yeah, Counselor Clucci's comments are well taken in terms of, this is a little bit out of council wheelhouse in terms of, knowing exactly what the setbacks are and what like you said, when you're reminded that there's a height restriction in certain zones versus, but, we don't necessarily see that stuff every single day and planning board does. And so I definitely would be willing and wanting to send this to planning board to hear their expert opinions on this. And they are very, very highly qualified to make suggestions.
Yeah.
So.
I would just second that. Like, I hope the planning board, I hope the planning staff can bring that to the planning board, that the council is interested in their expertise in offering to maybe offer more tweaks to this to make it more specific, to limit any unforeseen consequences. I know the real reason behind this is in order for the school to be built on the parcel that we got, they need that 15-foot setback. So from a municipal project perspective, this is really important for the school project to be able to fit in the space that they have. And so that's super important to me. So I'm going to support at least moving it to planning board and hope they can give us a little bit more guidance on some other restrictions maybe that we want to do to just protect against any unforeseen consequences. All right. So with that, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? All right. All those opposed? All right. Motion passes 6-1. Next is order number 23-105, first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading on the request from 3i Home POHA to enter into a credit enhancement agreement with the town of Scarborough to develop a state-of-the-art accessible apartment community to the town center at the Downs. This was brought forward by the Housing Alliance, and we had our a workshop on it at our last council meeting. So Tom, is there?
Yeah, there have been some developments since the workshop. Council provided some very helpful input, I think, at the workshop. And what's before you this evening has been modified. You may recall they were requesting a 60% credit enhancement agreement for the remainder of the downtown TIF term, approximately 25 years, I'll say. What's before you this evening is been modified to be 50% for 15 years. I must also admit fault on the part of myself. We did not get public hearings notice scheduled sufficiently to be able to hold a public hearing. That is a requirement of the statute. And so we're not in a position to have you consider it in final reading this evening. I've had a number of conversations with the applicant, apologize for the oversight. Nonetheless, they do intend to make application, I believe, tomorrow for the main housing. It does not appear that they'll be eligible for the 1 point that they were hoping for, but they're still very interested in this because it does help the bottom line and the overall underwriting for the project. If they are unsuccessful this time around, which happens on occasion, having this in hand will certainly set them up for future as well. So I do look for you to consider this favorably this evening, particularly given the modified terms that they're requesting.
Right. Are there any questions for Tom? Councilor Shu?
Yes, I thought part of the application process was that they wanted to get that point, and so they needed this to go, and it sounds like they've moved past us to get that point. Is that correct? This is very vague.
Yeah.
No, they are actually not eligible for the point because of my oversight in terms of
Okay.
not getting, putting the council in a position to consider it in final reading this evening. So it's a timing issue.
So either way, it's moved at this point.
In terms of the point, I think they've expressed there's value to their kind of bottom line, their pro forma. No question, having $700,000 in taxes reimbursed over the 15 years is significant to them. And so for that reason alone, they are interested in having you consider this. This matter would come back to you with public hearing and second reading at your next meeting. So it's first reading only.
All right, any other questions for Tom? No? Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? It looks like there's somebody online. Somebody had their hand raised. Allison? We're setting you up to speak. All right, you should be able to talk now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great, on the first try. Thank you very much. And it's, I'm glad to see that the request has been reduced to 50% because I think it's more consistent with what I remember with Jocelyn Place and perhaps some of the other CEA requests that have come in. I still feel that, as I expressed at the last council meeting, that there's the reduction. It's kind of too bad that it came from the 3I project versus Crossroads, who is getting a 40% credit for this. And the other piece of that is, from what I recall from the rate of growth ordinance conversation, that that this project is going to be treated or considered as their affordable housing to be applied to the 400 growth units that they get over the next 3 years. And they don't even have to take it out of their 400 growth units because now they can draw from the pool. So it just seems like a win-win-win for the Downs. And if we have negotiated with them on the school project that we were going to expand the CEA boundary to include a parcel that wasn't part of the TIF district, I would like to see some movement here where they're making some kind of a tax contribution. So there's more than 10% going to the cost to serve. So, you know, if the cost to serve is more than that, it's not picked up by other Scarborough taxpayers. And this is a fabulous project. And I think it's something that everyone in Scarborough would be proud to have. But I would like to see the town do something to try to encourage the Downs to do their part. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Allison. All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Counselor McGee?
Just out of curiosity, would it be better to wait to see how this project does in their round of funding with the state before we start approving the CEA? And my line of thought here is, what if it gets denied the funding and the project doesn't go forward? Are we approving a CEA and it's just going to sit out there? Or what if they actually need more or less than what they're asking us today? Like, are we now to a point where this really isn't as important and should be in the front of mind right now until we find out how their project does? Just a question.
Counselor Hamel?
Yeah, I have similar thoughts about this. Worthy project, no question. You know, I hope it passes. You know, it's unfortunate that the timing on the 1 point, so I get that. But I understand that they have significant funding. And I don't believe we should be the first one to, you know, who gets asked to put money in the hat, you know, with a, you know, for the reasons that that Nick mentioned, and also just, you know, I think that it's moving in the right direction, but I don't think we should be in a position to make a commitment like this at this time until we see the Downs doing something first, and then perhaps we match that. The other thing I'd say is, I know we got a nice letter from the Housing Alliance. You know, they had $200,000, you know, which comes from the town. So, you know, I'd like to see them perhaps also contribute to this. So that's my feeling on it.
Counselor Katarina?
Okay. Well, my original statement was going to say that, you know, again, this is first reading. It needs more work, obviously, and Nick makes a good point. I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee. I'm liaison. That's developer money that goes, that 200,000. So just so you know. I think this is a great project. I think it's interesting. I do want to know a little bit more, but I'm willing to move it forward at this point. But I'm willing to hear other people's arguments about, should we wait?
Counselor Seither?
Sure. I don't really see any harm in voting it through for first reading and still seeking the answer, you know, to Nick's question. I know Tom had mentioned that, you know, that maybe perhaps us approving this was better for the project in terms of their bottom line. And so, you know, a more specific answer to exactly how this benefits them, so that we can frame our decision at second reading would be helpful.
Counselor Clucci?
Yeah, that, I mean, my initial inclination was exactly what Nick said, was why don't we wait and see if they get their funding, and if maybe they need 2 points, or right, it could be a different structure, or, you know, we had to cancel the WEX CEA because they pulled out. And if there's no immediate benefit, I didn't see the need to have it, but you make a good point. You know, having it go to second reading, I don't see any harm, and it could at least be I guess, a signal that we're, you know, considering it. I don't know that it'll have any practical impact at the state, but it might. It's a good project. I suspect they're gonna find a way to get it funding. Is what I anticipate, or what I hope. Now, yeah, so I guess my inclination was to table, but if we want to wait till second reading it, because we might know more between now and then, I'm okay with that too.
My inclination was to potentially table until we know more. Not because we're not supportive of it moving forward, but at least one of the things, Tom, I think you had shared with leadership, that I think I shared with the council, was somehow that 40% CEA that covers the district, that may have helped them in their application as well. And I don't know if we ever got any feedback from them, or is that part of this process where they're going to submit the application and see if that helps them in some form or fashion where they may not need this. So I think there's a little bit of unknowns happening right now that, for me personally, I'm supportive of the project. I'm supportive of actually giving them some sort of tax credit in the future. I just feel like now it's a different ask than what was originally brought forward. And so I feel like we need to figure out what are the questions we have and get those to you to work with the applicant to figure out how we can get those answers before we move anything forward. That was my initial reaction. So I'm Counselor Shoup, is there anything you want to say?
No, I'm more in the boat of, I think the situation has changed. I felt like we had that whole presentation based around, we need to get this done to get the point, to do that. That's kind of what my train of thought was. I think like we might have a different situation in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Could I simply suggest, I cannot articulate the benefits of the bottom line, and I think there would be perhaps value in you hearing from those that can. More importantly, if you're to table, I'm not in a position to advise when that tabling should go to, and perhaps that could be better understood. So if that's in fact the will of council, you can do it with an informed tabling motion. So it's helpful to all involved, I suppose.
So are you suggesting potentially moving it forward to the first read public hearing? We'll learn more and then can make a determination of when to table based on new information that may come between now and the next.
Or perhaps receive information that's persuasive that you pass it. I don't want to.
Yeah.
But either way, there's no harm done. I think it does indicate a level of support, even in first reading. And I'll be certain to get the folks here at the meeting to be able to answer your questions sufficiently.
Well, is there anybody who wants to motion to table for a certain date?
Just talking this out a little further, do we have a general idea how long it takes them to find out more information on approval, denial? Do you have any concept of where that?
I don't. It's certainly weeks, if not months, in review. There are, dozens of applications. I'm sure they're all incredibly complicated in their own right. So I can't imagine that's days. It's certainly weeks, if not months, in review.
I guess my thought on it would be, should we push it to maybe right after the election in November? Do you think that's a month, and that second meeting after any council sits, just push it to there. And if it needs pushing again, we can push it again. But, at least they'll be on the schedule for then.
Would you like to make that as a motion?
That was kind of a wandering thought of mine, but I would love to put it into a motion format. I'll move to table this until November 8th. Is that the date?
November 15th.
15th, November 15th, 2023.
Second.
Second. All right, there's no discussion for table. So all those in favor? All right, all those opposed? All right, motion passes 6-1.
May I make one comment? Since it's
When we get
passed.
to counselor comments, because we've got to move on.
Okay. I won't forget.
All right. So next is order number 23-016. Act on the request to set the date and time for the regular municipal elections for Tuesday, November 7th, 2023 at the Scarborough High School Alumni Gym. Sign the warrant, appoint the warden and warden clerk, set the hours for voter registration, and act on appointments of election clerks pursuant to Chapter 200, Article 8, Nominations and Elections, Title 21A, 503, and authorize the town clerk to make any additional appointments as necessary. Jody, is there anything you'd like to add?
The standard procedures, it's noted in the summary page, it is pursuant to the town charter and state statutes. I will point out that I'm hoping that we'll have absentee voting available October 10th.
October 10th?
That's what we're, as long as we get our ballots in. We all set.
All right. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? No? All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Yes,
Counselor Hamel?
I'd just like to point out that with an election date like that, just want to make sure that we're following through on the commitment to have the new council seated on the 15th.
So that was, we can talk to that when we get to closing. I did ask everybody in my town or in my leadership update. We're thinking about moving the November 1st meeting to November 8th. So that way we can act on the election, and then the new council would actually start on the 15th. So there'd be one less meeting for this council, unfortunately. For some of us perhaps. So that is on the docket. I just want confirmation that people are available so that we can make that schedule change and make it known to the public. So that is the plan right now, unless somebody has any significant pushback on that.
And that wasn't just a way to get a comment in on the prior question. So
No.
just so you know.
Yeah. All right, any other, is this on the floor? I can't remember. Okay, any other discussion? No? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Item number 9 is non-action item. There are no non-action items. Item number 10, standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. Counselor Scyther, would you like to give an update?
Sure. Communications. I hope that everyone saw the email from Liam regarding the last question that we had before us for the community survey. That's the last input that we were kind of hoping to gather from full council. So if you have not taken time to just quickly email Liam with your feedback, or you don't have any feedback, that's fine. But the survey, as far as the communications committee is concerned, is ready to roll. And so that is very exciting to have that work done and to have that survey out to the community relatively shortly. And then my only other update is just a reminder, and there was a lot of attention to it today because we did the proclamation, but Sustainable Scarborough Day is going to be held on October 1st at Wentworth from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're expecting a lot of vendors, electric bikes and electric vehicles, and activities for a wide range of our residents. So that should hopefully be a really successful and fun day for them.
Right, Counselor Katarina?
Yeah, I just wanted to let the public know that there will be a meeting of the firing range committee, which we haven't met since forever, but we have an application for a new firing range. And since the ordinance hasn't been reviewed or updated since 2002, I thought it'd be a good idea to get the committee together. And we're meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the Public Safety Building. So anyone in the public who's interested in this subject, please feel free to come by.
Does that include any range time?
No,
Oh, too
not
bad.
tomorrow.
Counselor Shu?
First, I wanted to make a note. I think you guys know I'm the chair of the Appointments and Negotiation Committee. I just wanted to note that actually under the ordinance, all the agendas for all these committees and everything are supposed to be submitted 7 days in advance. I've been getting quite a bit of emails about, are you meeting? Where's the agenda? It's not online. It's not here. And so I just kind of wanted to send a reminder out that we are liaisons, to these committees, and I think we should try to maybe remind them, especially getting them up on the town website. I mean, I love talking to residents, but emails about things like that I think we should get better at.
Mhm.
We had the kickoff of the Ad Hoc Community Center Committee. It was great. We elected Patrick O'Reilly to be the chair. And they have quite the aggressive timeline. And I thought maybe we might circulate that around a little bit and get a little feedback from the counselors on that. It's a very aggressive timeline that after watching the schools, I have a couple concerns about it, but we have another meeting next week and I think we'll kind of dive into it a little bit more and kind of see where we're at. That's it.
Can I just
Yeah,
add to
please.
that? I mean, that was my reaction too when I saw the timeline. I'm confident. Well, part of it was they're reacting to the timeline that we gave them as the council.
Mhm.
So it could be we've got to go back to council and back off the timeline somewhat, but I just assume let them meet because they did just do their chair and vice chair and whatever and take it from there. But just know between Karen and I that we may come back and say, let's back it off a bit.
I gotta apologize. We did some nominations at ANC. So for first reading, is that what this is? First reading for
Posting the
appointment?
names.
First posting for appointments is for long range planning. We are nominating Robert Odlin. Thank you.
All right. Counselor Clucci.
So we actually had I think a standing ovation at the last finance committee meeting. Public Works Department came in and presented their vehicle maintenance and replacement protocols and schedule it's impressive. The work that they do with the relatively lean staff. And some of our harshest critics were in the audience and actually gave applause at the end. So that's it. That's it. Thanks for the update on community center. I'm very interested to follow that work. So.
Counselor Hamel.
Coastal Waters and Harbor Committee met last night, and they talked about parking at some length. And other issues related to the working waterfront covenant, the respective covenants covering parking and for commercial fishermen as well as others. So the committee's charged with coming back with some feedback on doing some best practice visits to other towns that have figured out parking, including Cape Elizabeth at Fort Williams and Saco, and I believe Old Orchard Beach. So we look forward to getting their feedback. And then another announcement and related to Pine Point, we're having a follow-up meeting to the one that was held in August that was hosted by Todd Souza. This is just a general meeting for the community. All are invited, and it'll be Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock at Engine 4, September 26th. I think John is thinking about joining us. There was a lot of energy at the last one when Todd was there, and he was kind enough to do, he did a great job facilitating the meeting, and he also was kind enough to kind of let it go in the direction that it went, which was sort of all over the place. So it's another chance for us to try to get a better handle on what the issues are there and to help perhaps facilitate some type of organization to develop similar to what's been done at Higgins Beach, so that folks in that neighborhood can help to identify and bring forward issues of concern to them. And it's, the thought is it would include both residents and seasonal residents. So, and thanks to the great job by Tody helping us to set that up. And also we're gonna have a flashing sign that will remind people that there's a meeting, community meeting at 6 o'clock on Tuesday. So look for that on the Pine Point Road near the circle.
Right. Right. All right, item number 11 is council member comments. Is there any comments? No? All right, so now moving on to order number 23-107. Act on the request for an executive session pursuant to Title I MRSA regarding a personnel matter relating to the town manager's employment agreement. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. All right, thank you, everybody. We will be adjourning from executive session, so we won't be returning. And we're gonna have Counselor Scyther get the time to give it to Tody.
Yes.